It being just past 6 p.m., I'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors to order for November 19th, 2019. If all members could please press their 10 buttons and silence all cell phones. As usual, our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation. I want you all to know we have some special guests with us this evening. Cub Scout Troop 3633 will be here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Then afterward, they will recite the Scout Oath and Law. We'll do the invocation after that, and then we have a quick presentation to them. So Cub Scout Troop 3633, if you could please enter and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Scout salute. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two. Scout sign. Please repeat after me, Scouts, the Scout Oath. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, and to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Now let's do the Scout law. Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Two. Scouts parade rest.
Now we'll do the invocation by Supervisor Lack, followed by a presentation of a certificate of recognition to Troop 3633. Supervisor Lack.
As we gather for this meeting, we call upon our Creator to be with us and to surround us with people who care and inspire us to make the right decisions. And a happy Thanksgiving to all. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Lack. Just going to step down here quickly. So I don't have a mic, so I'm going to speak fairly loudly. But Cub Scout Troop 3633 has done a number of things to earn this recognition. Not only have they been engaged in learning about civics, involved in youth citizenship, but they've also been involved in the community. That includes things like writing letters to military overseas veterans. Includes things like building bat boxes for our very own Winnebago County Park, as well as working on some of our local county trails. So this evening, we'd like to present them with a certificate of recognition. I'll present it to Cub Master Dan Brown, and it reads as follows. On behalf of the Winnebago County Board, in recognition of their continued commendable conduct of youth citizenship, on this day, November 19, 2019, the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors recognizes you with this certificate of recognition. Thank you, sir. Congratulations. Thank you. Once again, a round of applause.
Front row, left face Scouts. Follow Mr.
Thanks again. Well, isn't that a wonderful way to start our meeting this evening? Okay, next item on the agenda is a motion to adopt this evening's agenda. For that, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move to adopt this evening's agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt this evening's agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item on the agenda. That's a time with each county board meeting in which we allow an opportunity for the public to speak on any item under our jurisdiction or any item on our agenda this evening. Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening? Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening? Please, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Amy Albright. My address is 5744 Ontario, Butamore. I am the Executive Director of the Oshkosh Convention and Visitors Bureau, and just wanted to give a little background on Jim's presentation that he's going to do tonight on the airport, just from the standpoint of the visitor perspective. When we're talking about our airport in Oshkosh, we're talking about the front door to our community. We welcome over 1 million visitors a year, many by plane, and we really feel from our standpoint that the airport is one of those gateways into our community that really needs to be looked at. It's a first impression, it's an opportunity to tell our story, and it's an area of our community that needs some attention. So I just wanted to give my support for listening and hearing out his presentation, and just a important piece of our community that is a big deal for visitors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? I'll say one final time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening on anything on the agenda or anything under county jurisdiction? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the evening and move right down to correspondence. I'll call on Clerk Ertmer.
There we go. Thank you. Tonight you have a petition for zoning amendment from Stephen Potratz, Town of Nakaimai, requesting a zoning change from A2B3 to A2 for agricultural purposes. That's referred to planning and zoning. A petition for zoning amendment from Thomas M. Crom in the Town of Nepieskan, requesting a zoning change from A2 to R1 for residential use. That's referred to planning and zoning. Notice of claim from Sophia Q. for damage to her vehicle caused by an accident with a county facilities vehicle. That's referred to the Personnel and Finance Committee. And then you have a number of resolutions from other counties. The first are from Outagamie County, and number 64 supports legislation that would address nonpartisan redistricting. Resolution 72 urges the governor and the legislators to make changes to encourage families to maintain Wisconsin as their residence and to develop a plan to encourage families to move to Wisconsin. Resolution 84 supports pending legislation that would require the Department of Revenue to post on their website information about the determination of utility aid payments. And then the final one is from Wood County, and that is encouraging the Wisconsin legislature to revise the statute for a consistent charge for court costs, fees, and surcharges in the Office of the Clerk of Courts and Register and Probate. And that is all.
Thank you, Clerk Ertmer. Moving on down to the next item, that's reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any commissions and boards? I see a number. First, I'll call on Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Norton.
As you notice on the agenda tonight, we have our Airport Director, Jim Shell, going to give you a presentation on the terminal building project. Our committee has already had the presentation. Facilities was last week. He's presenting to you tonight. We will do P&F the first week in December and back to the county board with a resolution on the December 17th meeting. What I wanted to emphasize is there's been a lot of non-transparency before Jim got here, and since he's been here, he's been nothing but honest and transparent to the board, to the committee, to the people in Oshkosh and Winnebago County. So if you have any questions tonight on his presentation, feel free to ask him. I'm sure he's got the answer and is willing to give you any answer that you would need to help you make your decision on the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. First of all, I and the other members of the Parks Committee attended the Wisconsin Park and Recreation Association annual conference last month in Wisconsin Dells, and one of the particular group sessions that I had to is, and I'm biased, but had to do with the importance of parks. And what the presenter said gave an example of when she was a parks director in a conservative town in Missouri, when the federal government was giving money during the recession and tried to have several ready projects to help get people back to work. She recalled a slide of Vice President Biden at the time saying, I won't do any of this money going to build any tennis courts or any golf courses. And she said, well, her town took the money and said, built to help repair a 3-mile road in the middle of her town, which really didn't bring any business. And her point was the money that she could have used, that $3 million, could have brought more business and more people to her town. And that's why she emphasized the importance of parks. The second thing I want to report on is I and Representative Supervisor Launschlager went to our Wisconsin County Association Health and Human Services Steering Committee on a couple Fridays ago, and we got an update on the child birth recovery costs, which we heard about in the budget session. As you know, the federal government will not match us, and the state government did a double whammy at the time by not having include us getting our birth recovery costs from fathers. Well, there is legislation pending that would correct that, in that the Democrats were satisfied that low-income fathers would not be paid or would not have to be forced to pay, and the Republicans agreed to funding. But the problem is now that we heard from our Chair, Kasdorf, is that the Republicans won't pass the bill or move the bill forward unless it's a veto-proof from the governor. So I would encourage people to tell the Democrat colleagues to make sure they keep up and pass it, and tell the governor not to veto it. And I would encourage the Republicans to talk to Republican colleagues in the state legislature and have them to passion for it, because as it stands right now, we'll lose $144,000 every year and more if we don't get this correction, which will make us whole. And because there's no action taken by the end of this year, it'll hurt us this year, but hopefully they can correct it for next year. So that's my update, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone on by their desk has a paper from Heather Taylor about the scholarship program that we started. The deadline to get it done is March 23rd, 2020. The nice thing about it is Winnebago County, as far as I know, maybe some other counties followed us, but we were the first county to turn around and do something for our kids. June 15th, 1999, we started our scholarship program, which means 20 years ago we started for our kids. And I hope we can go at least another 120 years. But anyway, I want to make everybody aware that the scholarship program is up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Konecki, followed by Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too attended the Wisconsin Dells Park and Rec presentation. I was there 3 days, took in 8 presentations, very informative. And the kids, boy, there's a lot of neat playground equipment coming out there. They should be very happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker, Supervisor Smith, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Tuesday, November 12th, I attended the Wisconsin DOT Freight Railroad Conference. Some good news for Wisconsin farmers. The exports are up between 5 and 6%. All the rail projects that have been planned from last year through this year are on schedule and on time. One of the things that also we had our meeting of the Eastern Wisconsin Counties Railroad Consortium the following day on Wednesday, where we completed our information on the conference, and also we voted at that time to continue our membership in the consortium at $25,000 per year per county in the consortium. Now, we are one of the lowest member fees in the consortium. Some of them are over $30,000. So we've got all our projects going. They're being funded as they need to be. The crossings are being upgraded as we speak, and there is no need to increase our share of the funding.
Thank you, Supervisor Smith. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things here. On legislative, we've decided I'm going to cut back on some of the meetings we voted on last time unless there's something real important. It seems like less people are coming, and especially our legislators. And I think one of the reasons that could be is because ourselves are not bringing anything forward from the floor. It's mainly we're going ahead and we're copying the rest and we're just going along with it. So unless we come up with something real special or whatever, we probably are going to go 4 to 6 times a year is all. Second thing is on the Planning and Zoning Committee. It was sent back after the Sawyer Creek watershed to the Planning and Zoning again. We have not just let that die. We have turned it back over to Oshkosh and told them, what are you going to do now about it? You've created the problem. They have not gotten back to us as of yet. I will tell you that Supervisor Eisen is already signed up to go to an insurance meeting on this, which we appreciate that very much. I'm going to try to make it, but he has already signed up for it. And so that's quite concerning to him. So we are getting the whole county involved with him being in Neenah and Oshkosh and all that down there. But that's where it sits right now. We've turned it to Oshkosh. Now you tell us what you're going to do with it. And if nothing else, then we're going to have to go through the DNR and everything. But we're going to try to resolve it that way. So it is not a dead issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude that portion of the agenda and move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from October 15th and also the October 28th and 29th county budget meetings. There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? I see one call-in. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to correct the minutes of the budget session. For amendment number 5, I was not a co-sponsor, so I would like to have that corrected.
We will have that corrected. Thank you. Any other corrections, changes in regards to either minutes from the 15th as well as the 28th and 29th?
Sean, I think a couple of the supervisors are listed on there by mistakes too, so I'll just remove them
Okay.
automatically.
So we'll make those corrections. Any others? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item, that's the county executive's report, followed by multiple county executive appointments. Executive Harris.
I would like to start out with an introduction. The governor has made an appointment of a new coroner for Winnebago County, and she's our former deputy coroner, Cheryl Bramer. And there's a couple changes coming in that office that I think she's going to tell you about for just a minute. And she can come up to the mic. You can come up to the mic right there. And one of the changes I want to let you know is that their offices will be moving out of the basement of Orrin King and will be in the administrative building by the end of the year.
This is the new coroner now?
The new coroner, Cheryl Bramer.
Please go right ahead, Coroner Bramer.
Thank you. Sorry, this was kind of sprung on me last minute here. So like Mark had said, I've actually been with the coroner's office. I've been a deputy since 2012. I've averaged about 84 hours on call per week, and I am trying very hard to continue to just maintain those hours in the field as well as the office. There's going to be some times when I'm not going to be able to hold up to that, but I do not plan on pulling myself out of the field. The other thing is we have already reestablished our relationship with the Fond du Lac County Medical Examiner's Office, which will save the county a very good portion of money on autopsies and on transport. That's all the further I've gotten so far in my 13 or 18 days. So.
Thank you, Coroner Bramer. Welcome.
It's normally my custom to point out a couple things on the agenda that I would encourage support for.
Executive Harris, we had one call in regards to, if you don't mind, I'm going
sure.
to call on Supervisor Eisen. He had one comment. Please, go right ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could Coroner Bremer give us a rundown on her credentials and experience besides her 8 years on the job?
Coroner Bramer, any other comments you want to provide?
As far as my credentials go, I mean, obviously, in the 8 years that I've been with the coroner's office, I've investigated over,
If you could please step to the mic again.
okay, in my time with the coroner's office, I have investigated over 1,030 deaths. I guess nothing ever surprises me, I mean, as far as death calls go, but, I mean, are you looking for schooling or education as
Well,
what
are
you're
you
looking for, or-
certified in the terms of the credentials, being in the running for our future medical examiner position?
I am actually, I'm 2 classes away from completing my forensic science degree, as well as mortuary science degree. I already have my evidence technician certification. Both of those degrees deal with the criminal justice side of things and the medical side of things. So I do have, you know, quite a few courses that I've completed as far as you know, anatomy and physiology, advanced anatomy and physiology, microbiology. So I mean, I do have the training as far as, and now the experience over the years for the medical background of things. The one certification that I do wish to get, which I have applied, put my application is for the AMBDI certification, and I do have Dr. Doug Kelly, pathologist, who is going to be my sponsor on that. Figure I should have that certification within probably 6 months.
I really don't want to put you on the spot, but are you amenable if the county executive offered you the medical examiner's position? Would you be amenable to going forth?
I don't know that we need to go into that this evening.
Actually,
I wanted to give her an
there is
opportunity to introduce
There's one thing
herself. and
that I
think-
would like to say as far as that goes. I would love to see this county move forward to a medical examiner's. I would love that. I would love to apply for that position. Right now, I mean, I would say let's change it over tomorrow. My concern is, no, even before the term is done, I'm willing to do that. But what I'd like to do, I guess, is to gain the trust of the board and to prove myself. You know, not that my application is put sideways because, or set aside because of the person that was in before me. I guess I'd like that chance to prove myself.
Get the rest of the certifications. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Coroner Bramer, and thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Please proceed, Executive
Yeah,
Director. Thank
there's
you.
a couple items I wanted to point out on the agenda. You have a roof repair at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, Fox Cities. I think it's always appropriate to keep your roofs in good repair. That protects the buildings that we co-own with Outagamie County, and so I think that's an important item. There's also one that's a little bit more complicated, but also very important, and that's to adopt revisions to Winnebago County's compensation schedule for 2020. As you know, we do a pay-for-performance system, and the Personnel Director will explain it when that item comes up, I'm sure. But we give raises, and the raises have 2 components, a merit component and a component that's affected by where you fall within your pay range. If you don't periodically adjust those pay ranges, then the system doesn't work well because everybody ends up accumulating towards the middle and the top half of their pay range. So that portion of the system doesn't work well. And you also then have starting pays that fall well below market, which would be an adverse effect on our ability to hire good people. So I'm hoping that you'll hear the Personnel Director out on that item and that you'll support it. And that's what I have for my presentation, although I have numerous appointments to do.
Please go ahead and proceed to the appointments.
Okay. The first one is a reappointment to the Aging and Disability Resource Center Committee, and that's Harold Singstock.
There's a motion and a second to approve the appointment to Aging Disability Resource Center Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
I've got appointments to a complete count committee, and that's a committee that has to deal with trying to make sure the census reaches difficult-to-reach populations. These are the initial 3 appointments. We may seek out participation by people in the community as well, but we're going to start out with these 3 members. It's Michael Norton, Larry Smith, and Stephanie Spellman.
There's a motion and a second to approve the appointments to the Complete Count Committee. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
I've got 2 reappointments to the Human Service Board. It's Judy Wright and Donna Laurie.
There's a motion and a second to approve the Human Services Board appointments. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
I've got appointments and reappointments to the Local Emergency Planning Commission. It's Ray Polonin, Tim Eichmann, Carl Moll, Suzanne Morowski, and Brian Bending.
Is there a motion to approve? There's a motion and a second to approve the appointments to the Local Emergency Planning Commission. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And I've got an appointment and reappointments to the Winnefox Library System Board of Trustees. It's David Rucker, Randall Fieldhack, Elizabeth Eisen, and Bill Bracken.
There's a motion and a second to approve the Winnefox Library System Board of Trustees appointments. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries with 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes the county executive's report and appointments. Yes, please. Supervisor Norton.
Yes, and Wish Politics yesterday reported that Governor Evers and Attorney General Call have given out, or will be given $1.5 million in diversion programs and treatment alternatives. Have we sought any of this money? Because part of this report that Wish Politics sent, I clicked on the map of the counties that are getting funding in 2020, and Winnebago County isn't getting any of it. I guess
No.
I'll ask you or anyone, why are we not trying to get that kind of funding when we are trying to set up a new diversion program? I'll ask that.
I think the funding was specifically targeted to certain areas from the beginning, and that there wasn't a general application towards those monies. So this is coming from the State House.
Now, Attorney General Calls said, I guess there hasn't been a settlement yet in the opiate case. If there's a settlement, are we going to try to actively get our share? Because from my understanding, in another reading, is some counties have gotten money and you're used it to hire caseworkers for specific things that, for people who for the opioid crisis. Are we going to try for those? Because I'm a little concerned that we're not included in either this program or at least in the next kind of funding that may come, because we are trying different terms, and that's my concern.
I think we recently got some drug rehabilitation monies for the health department. I know there's grants passing through the Human Service Department all the time. There is a process for applying and seeking grants, but sometimes the grants are targeted to specific areas of the state, and you don't find out about the grant until the grants are awarded. So I think that's the case with the recent story, because the day that the story broke that new monies were becoming available, it also named what communities were receiving them.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton, and thank you, Executive Harris.
Thank you.
Moving on down to the next item, that's County Board Chairman's report. First, Supervisor Roble is excused this evening. Also, related to the reports from committees, commissions, and boards, we did have a Board of Health meeting today, so there will be no Board of Health meeting for the month of December. Also, want to remind everyone that we have our holiday Christmas party coming up soon, December 16th, which is the Monday before our December County Board meeting on December 17th. So it's December 16th. You all should have an invitation on your desk with some information. It's at Jimmy's White House Inn in Butimore this year, and the cocktails are at 5:30, dinner's at 6. So certainly all are encouraged to attend, and look forward to seeing as many as possible there. And then also just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone in advance. got Thanksgiving next week, and, I know I said it last year, but I'm truly thankful. One of the things I'm thankful is certainly working with all of you. I truly mean that. It really is an honor and pleasure to work with all of you. So thank you for all that. I also want to say happy and good luck hunting for the hunters in the room, and be safe out there. So, and that concludes my report. So moving on down, we have two presentations this evening. The first is General Aviation Terminal Building Project presentation by our Airport Director, Jim Schell. You also have some information slides on your desk. So please, Director Schell, you can come right up to the front here. Please go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I will attempt to be brief, although this is sort of the presentation for a $3.9 million funding request, so I will give it its due for sure, and I will answer any questions you may have afterwards. So there should be a handout that was distributed, which are actually just the slides that I'm going to show here today. And I'll, again, be brief. There's only 8 slides, right? So that's hopefully pretty quick and to the point. What I'll start with is to say that this project has been underway in one form or fashion since 2013. We began this project with a design of a conceptual design of a new general aviation facility that was actually about 21,000 square feet back in 2013. That was kind of looked at, revised, and fast forward to 2019, actually 2016, when the original design for the building that is in front of you today was completed. It's about 12,500 square feet. There's a lot of history behind that, but we've gotten to the point where we're at about 12,000 square feet on a new facility. So that being said, since I came on board in April of 2018, what we've done is we've really evaluated all of our options through the Aviation Committee and the county's Facilities Committee. Actually, the committees both had a joint meeting in February of this year where it was discussed and approved to pursue the new general aviation terminal yet again. And the idea was that we were going to evaluate all of our options, which we now have. We actually evaluated about 6 options. I won't go into each one in detail. However, really when it comes down to it, every single option we looked at, aside from building a new facility and kind of starting over, if you will, is that there's only one viable long-term 50-year plus option out there. And really, in order to contribute to the airport being self-sustaining long-term, this is a good step in that direction. And also, in order for us to serve the needs of the flying public that we do from a general aviation perspective. As many folks know in the room, and predates me here in Oshkosh, we haven't had commercial service for 16 years. So that being said, we're looking forward to updated facilities here going forward. It helps if I turn it on. Okay. So currently, right now, and I think you've all seen this slide, perhaps in January when I was in front of the county board. Currently, what we are operating out of is a building that was built in 1958. That's the building that's leased to Basler Flight Service today. The county owns this building. It was actually the original terminal for the airport back in 1958. Then connected to it in the distance, on the top picture, is the existing 1971 commercial service terminal, which is still, of course, standing and operational to this day. But simply show you that from the perspective of that's what, as the CVB has pointed out with Ms. Albright, is that's the gateway to Oshkosh from the air. That's what you see when you arrive in an airplane, and that's what you see when you come back through from the parking lot. So to put that a little bit in more perspective, it really is the gateway to the community from the air. And so to put that in more perspective, we've got 3 other examples. I think you've seen these before. The first one would be Fond du Lac, and the building they built in around 2009, so it's about 10 years old now. The building in Appleton, which of course Appleton is a commercial service airport, however, this is the building that they facilitate general aviation traffic out of. This is a building that was built, I want to say, in 2013, so it's about 6 years old. And then down in the corner, that's Janesville, down in the southern part of the state. That's a multi-year project in order to expand and remodel and completely revamp a building that they had existing, but they expanded it quite substantially. And that project, I want to say, finished about 5 years ago. Multi-year project, and it was about a $5 million project to build the building that they have now in Janesville. Again, that's their GA terminal down there. There's a number of others around the state, but the point is that it's the gateway to your community, and we'd like to have a good first impression to the folks that come in or out, primarily to do business in this community. That's what we serve by and large, is business-type traffic. So I'll show you the rendering from 2016. I'll put a caveat to this to say this rendering was done in 2016. There's a large red square with an X through it. That's actually the, and I show you this to say, this is essentially what the building's going to look like if you can envision that red box being removed from the second story. Mostly that was HVAC and mechanical that was designed to go up there, and a very, very small amount of finished square footage that was, I guess, anticipated as some kind of airplane viewing area. I really feel like it's a waste to put a second floor on this building. One-story building gets us every single functional need met, and to have the mechanicals on the roof of a one-story building just for the heck of it really doesn't make much sense. There's a number of issues up there with having boilers on the roof and those sorts of things. So in order to accommodate everything kind of on the ground level, this section is going to be redesigned to be removed from the second story and placed on the ground level in an enclosure. So generally speaking, this rendering is going to be pretty accurate to what you're going to see should this project be approved for the $3.9 million. I will say we're revisiting this right now with the architect and looking at exterior finishes. What can we do within the budget that we already have for the project to make sure we're putting our best foot forward. We've talked with our tenant advisory group, our aviation committee, on the fact that we want the building that really represents our community, and we want the building that really represents Whitman itself. And that's really hard to, I'm sure there's 36 different opinions in the room of what that looks like. However, we also have to work within the fact that we've designed a building, and we can't really go back to the drawing board at this point, but we can, get it right the first time. And that kind of goes into the next slide, which is the draft. Floor plan. I'll stress draft. However, this is pretty close to what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. So right now what we've done, if you saw the floor plan on this building 3 years ago, a year ago, what have you, this floor plan looked a bit different. One of the biggest changes is that the restroom block, which is right here, in fact, I'll run through it real quickly. One of the biggest changes that we made is that the restroom block jutted way out into the lobby in this sort of fashion and through here. And what that did was really close off. Sorry, can everybody hear me all right? Okay. I can shout if that's better, but okay. What it really did was close off the circulation space through the parking lot side, coming through the front access, through the lobby, and then out into the air side to the aircraft. And so we've recessed this back into a less obtrusive to the lobby and the circulation space position in the building. Right up front, we have a car rental concession for a rental counter, an office, and a wash bay that's been designed into the building. I'll get to that here in a second. The purple is Basler Flight Service, a space that they will lease from the airport. It's about 2,000 square feet in total, and so that's their exclusive use space, operating their business, fueling aircraft, hangaring aircraft, providing all the services to the general aviation flying public that they do and have for a very long time. This, and it's kind of hard to see the difference here, but this piece is the airport administration office suite, reception area, assistant airport director's office, operations manager's office, a copy room, and a file room. So pretty snug, pretty tight. It's really a very conservative amount of space, and really the only restrooms for our offices and the general public are the main restrooms for the building. So there's not even a restroom in the office building and in the office itself. Then we have a garage space which is designed for storing operationally necessary equipment and vehicles, of which we have quite a few at the airport, and our existing storage spaces elsewhere on the airport are really maxed out to the point where we're talking about leaving vehicles outside in this beautiful 6 months that we call winter, and have an operational need to make sure the airport's functioning. It doesn't really help too much if you get an inch of ice on your window, then you need to get on the airfield right now. So there's 3 vehicles that would be typically in there, along with some additional space for equipment. This space up here is kind of a flex space as well as a conference room area. So there's no conference room in the airport administration offices. That would be the central conference room in this general vicinity for the airport. But this can be 1 room or 3 rooms, so it's actually a fair amount of square footage. However, this space is quite a bit smaller if you looked at the sectioned off floor plan here, quite a bit smaller than what we currently do have in the existing terminal for meeting room, conference room space. So it would be hosting a number of different meetings for the airport throughout the year, and then it's also rentable as an event space. And that's one of the things where I'd like to tie the community piece back in, is saying, come out and have your meeting at the airport. Yes, there might be a fee. In fact, there will be a fee, unless you're a county department. We offer our conference room now to county departments for no fee, and we will continue to offer this for different county entities for no fee. However, it's a revenue generating space, and it is a space that really can allow people to come out, have their meeting at a nice modern facility at the airport, you know, have a small event at the airport. I mean, be open to the public and be something that we would advertise a bit more than we have in the past of the existing spaces that we have. Essentially, this is the floor plan. Again, like I said, it's draft. We're going back again with the architect and saying, okay, it's great to draw different lines on a page, but then they have to revise all of their drawings for when we put this project out to bid to say, we have one shot to get this right the first time, and there's a number of things we sat down with airport staff, the architect, and also Basler Flight Service in order to really ascertain what we show it on paper right now, and then what really works for all those different functions for the airport long term. And there's a number of differences, both brought up by airport staff and Basler Flight Service. So this is getting a lot closer to what it's ended up going to be, but there might be a wall shifted here, a wall shifted there on the final floor plan. But generally speaking, that's not going to add any cost. That's really just going to, you know, change the dimensions of a room or an existing space as we build it. This is difficult to see on the slide, probably a little bit easier to see on your handout, but this is the site plan, and also a bit in draft format because we're looking at this as well with the architect. Real briefly, this is the existing terminal in this area. This is the west wing, as we call it. There's Basler Flight Service operates out of now. It's kind of underneath the gray square. And then this gray block is the footprint of the new facility. New access drive coming in and out. We're actually looking at that right now as well with our architect and the site planning team. And then the new parking lot, essentially for servicing the building. And up to the top of the page would be north, straight down would be south. This would be the aircraft parking area and apron for the airport on this side of the airfield. So let's talk money. Everybody's favorite, right? This is why we came today. It's a $6.8 million project. We updated those estimates earlier this year. We hadn't had an updated estimate since 2016, so we felt with construction costs doing what they've done, it would be only prudent to get a good number to start working off of. So once we had that joint meeting in February, we went back to the architect and said, you know, we need to update this and get a realistic estimate for today's, you know, construction costs and everything that we've, you know, put together to date on the project. So it's a $6.8 million project, $1 million of which is designated to demolish the existing commercial service terminal. And then roughly $5.8 million is the site work, the grading, the drainage, the utilities, and then the actual vertical construction of the new building, along with all the paving and the new parking lot, essentially. How that's coming now in a funding request, December 17th, is a $3.9 million funding request that's anticipated to match the $1.1 million that was approved by the county board in fall of 2017. I understand that 1.1 was approved in a slightly different manner than what the bigger project is showing today. However, most of that funding was earmarked towards tearing down the existing terminal. So quite frankly, we'll be using that money for largely the same purpose and rolling it into the larger project. We will be assured that we'll bring forward a resolution that makes sure that's clear to the county board, but we intend to use that 1.1 towards mostly the same purpose as we had before. The $3.9 million, I will explain here in just a fair amount of detail. That funding request as it stands today is being brought forward as $2 million to be taken from the undesignated general fund balance for the county. and $1.9 million to be taken, or excuse me, to be additional bonding. So the 1.1 from fall of 2017 is already earmarked for future bonding, and then the additional 1.9 in additional bonding would make $3 million financed by debt, $2 million financed by coming out of the general fund for the county. Then we've got, so for a total of $5 million county investment. Then we've got Bureau of Aeronautics, Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics. That's the state organization that we typically look to for funding on the airport. We have been successful in attaining $1.8 million from the state on this project. Typically speaking, their statutory limit is $1.25 million. However, they can look at it as sort of two separate projects, $1.25 million for the building, and then about another $500,000 for site work, grading, drainage, utilities, those other things that are outside of the building envelope. So we've been very successful and have a great funding partner with the Bureau with a number of different projects in my 18 months at the airport. But this is one that is huge, in my opinion, on this project this time around because it wasn't there last time, about 2 years ago. So we have $1.8 million is anticipated for grant assistance from the Bureau. Again, I touched on what we've been talking about with our architect. In fact, we're getting cost proposals in order to actually redesign portions of the building. I think that's necessary to make sure we're building what we know is going to serve us for the long term and not have to go back after it's built and start tearing out walls and decide, wow, that was really silly, we shouldn't have done that. And those are the kind of things we're trying to avoid to build it right the first time. So in that realm, we had $600,000 approved by the county board in 2016 for just design on the building. This would be redesign, however, same purpose, paying the architect that we already have on on contract for the design work, which is Martin and Riley, and the remaining funds again would be used for that redesign, bidding services, and then construction administration services, which the original contract we have executed with Martin and Riley anticipated all of that. However, now we're asking them to make a few changes. So with that, we've spent less than half of the originally appropriated amount, and I don't anticipate spending anywhere near the remainder. However, we need to make sure we're getting it right the first time, and that really honestly is a small price to pay, in my estimation, of making sure that it's correct on a $7 million project almost. So, draft timeline on the project. We're looking to go back to Martin and Riley, get the floor plan finalized so they can begin their redesign work here in the next week or two. I know November 18th is yesterday. Is it the 19th today? It's a rough timeline. So, in fact, I'm trying to get a meeting set up either end of this week or early next week so we can hammer that out before Thanksgiving. December 17th will be the final funding request to the county board. As Supervisor Gabbert had mentioned, it's already gone through Aviation Committee and Facilities Committee, both unanimously. So the next step is December 5th for P&F, and that'll be, December 5th, and then the final request, December 17th. The rest of our timeline, I'll just give a few highlights. Construction document phase, anticipated for January of next year, in order to get submittals to the Bureau and the City of Oshkosh for review. We're anticipating a bid timeline of March through April of next year, with a bid opening mid to late April, with construction beginning thereafter in May or the early part of June at the latest. With about a 12-month time frame on construction, that puts us June of 2021 for completion. So I may have hopefully gone through that at the adequate amount of time, and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Very good, thank you. We'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I see a couple. So first I'll call on Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the, hello? I have questions about the restrooms in the floor plan. There don't look like there's enough room for a changing table in the public restrooms. And the mother's room, I don't see a sink. I don't see room for a changing table. I don't see room for a chair for her to nurse in. Am I just not good at looking at sizes, but because it looks really tiny?
Yep, and that's a great question. What I'll point out again is it's a draft floor plan. Not every single detail is shown on that right now because we've had to get something on paper in order to show the county board. However, I can assure you all of those things that you referenced are included in the design. In fact, although those things were in the original design of the floor plan before we made a few modifications, the mother's room will be fully up to code of what that needs, and the changing tables and so forth in the restrooms as code calls out for. So what I'll say again, don't put 100% stock into that draft floor plan, because there are some details that aren't shown, the finer details that you're pointing out that aren't shown on that floor plan right now, because we're just at the early stages of going back to the architect to get that finalized with every single detail, and we're going to finalize that here shortly.
Okay, and changing tables in both men's room and women's room for babies? Mm-hmm. Okay, and still, even if I can't see the picture of the sink in the mother's room, it looks really tiny to include a changing table and a chair for her.
Sure. Well, we'll lean on our architect to tell us
Okay.
exactly what square footage is required by code.
Okay.
We may try to go a bit larger than that if possible. However, we will certainly do whatever is required by building code.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, has anyone given any thought to incorporating any renewable energy features in this new design? Where the roof is sloped down on that new part, I mean, it's a perfect spot to put solar panels. I mean, I know it would increase the cost, but in the long term, I think the county should be moving towards doing new construction with renewable energy.
Sure.
features.
Thank you for the question. I'll say one thing, and then I'll open it up if the board chair would allow that to Mr. Elder, who's back in the back of the room, to talk maybe more about the solar pros and cons. However, this building is designed very energy efficiently. However, what I'd point out is that the existing terminal is horribly energy inefficient.
Right.
So there's been a number of concepts that have been incorporated in this design to make sure we're reducing our operating costs financially, and that's one huge benefit. I alluded to the fact that this is a project that'll help us towards that self-sustaining financial model of running the airport. And one of those is, right now, on average, every 3 year, the last 3 year annual average, utilities, gas, water, heat, electric, all that, in order to keep the lights on, the air conditioning, all that at the existing terminal, $77,000 a year. The new estimate on the 12,000 square foot building is about $10,000 per year. Now the solar piece, I'm not an expert on solar. In fact, if you look at Appleton, that whole side of the roof is solar panels. They went for attaining LEED certification at a very high level on that building, but there are costs to that, and there are long-term payback scenarios which you have to obviously to balance in order to look at doing things like solar and other renewable energy sources. So if Mike has anything to add, if that's
Please.
acceptable.
Director Elder, any comments in regards to the potential for solar panels?
To answer your question, we did look at all those things. There's new heating and refrigeration systems. It's called variable flow refrigerant. That was cost prohibitive. And if you look at solar power, the lifespan for the equipment is shorter than what the payback is for it. And part of the payback is if you can sell your excess power back to utilities. The utilities are starting to take a strong stance on that, in that they're not paying you what they used to be paying, because they have to have all the standby generation. So to answer your question without a real long story, a lot of the alternative energy sources don't make our payback. They're in excess of 20 years.
Thank you, Director Eller.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon, for the comment. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jim, for, again, approaching this in such a professional manner. We really appreciate that. Makes our job a lot easier to make decisions. I just did a quick calculation about cost per square foot, and about $544 per square foot. And do we know how those costs compare with other similar? I know it's hard because of the timing of when we're doing this, but
Sure.
when we look at other similar projects, are we in the ballpark?
Well, I would say the cost per square foot is nowhere near $500 per square foot. I don't know if you're taking the 6.8 million figure and taking the square footage,
Yeah.
because $1 million is demolition,
Yes.
and about another $500,000 or so is site work.
Okay.
So when you really boil it down, the building is more of a $5 million type building
Mhm.
in total, and so I believe the square footage number is more in the 380 ballpark based on our last estimates.
And do you know what commercial space is these days? Or does?
You know, I think Mr. Elder
No?
could probably
Good,
attest to that a
okay.
little bit better than I on new construction for, when you say commercial space, I mean, there's lots of different types of commercial space.
Right,
What
right.
I'll say is an airport is a bit unique compared to a lot of other types of construction, and I've heard comparisons to hospitals, I've heard comparisons to other
Yeah.
things. What I will say is this. Again, helps if I turn it on. Appleton's GA building, as I mentioned, with like LEED certification, those sorts of things, and all the finishes that they put in that building are very, very nice. However, the cost per square foot, and bear in mind, this was built 5 or 6 years ago, was a lot higher than what we're talking about because, of all the different finishes and the LEED certification and the energy efficiency and all those things. They cost money. I mean, they're not cheap. And so generally speaking, we're doing things, if you will, cheaper than what Appleton did, all things being the same. You could look back in 2013 in construction costs and then put that escalator on what happens now in 2019 and 2020 and beyond. So we're doing it, I think, as financially conservative as possible. Everything we're looking at with the architect, it's tried to reduce cost where possible, or at the very least remain the same, and still get, kind of the bang for our buck of what we should for a modern facility.
Okay, and then another question I had, and I should have asked you the other day, was is there an opportunity to sell some of the property on the north side? I think that's the north side of the building, that on 20th? Because it seems like the parking lot is probably too big for the terminal now. And or do you have other plans for that?
Well, that's a great question, and actually right now we're in the middle of a master plan update for the airport, which is a long time coming, and part of that plays into the master planning process and what we look at for different tracts of our land that are available for development or redevelopment. So in this case, the parcel that is essentially over in this area, which would abut the commercial service apron, former commercial service apron. This is a concrete aircraft parking apron down here. This will be prime for redevelopment on larger transient or corporate type hangars. But we're having the master plan look at a lot of different things from a geographic standpoint. So I won't try to go delve into too much of that in this discussion. However, there is a fair amount of land to the north of this site plan between there and 20th Avenue that we are having the master plan look at for non-aeronautical potential revenue generating purposes. And we have a non-aeronautical development on the airport known as the Hilton, and that generates a lot of revenue for the airport on an annual basis. So we're looking into all of those things in order to really, the end goal is, financially speaking, is to be self-sustaining.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that. And then one more question, and maybe this kind of dovetails with Amy being here, but when we look at the people who come to the airport, is there some way we can measure if they're prospects for locating business, or is there some tangible outcome that we can measure to, like we do with events and economic impact? Do you know, are we tracking any of that?
Sure, I think it all kind of plays into having the facility that, when you're looking at people to come invest in your community, whether that be through initiatives at GoEDC, the chamber, the city, whoever, you're looking for those folks to have a good first impression. So I think that's number one, because right now I think the impression that they get is that we haven't invested in ourselves, quite honestly. And so that's, I think, step one. Step two would be things like informational brochures in the airport, allowing people to know that, there's land available for development. There's potentially, hangars available for lease or sale or rent or whatever it might be. So there's ability for any kind of those developments at the airport and making sure that's very, very obvious. In fact, we've been talking with the CVB from a visitor perspective of having a presence in the new building, a la what they have in their facility. And I think there's kind of an outpost out at the outlets, right? So we're trying to incorporate some sort of visit Oshkosh for pleasure sort of presence. And then we're also certainly going to be pushing our developments as best we can and as tastefully as we can within the new facility. So, not everybody that comes there is going to be ready to, you know,
Locate their
you know,
business.
put stakes in the aviation business park.
Yeah.
However, it is a tool down that path of trying to recruit those type of businesses. And the tool that we have currently just is not, I mean, from that sense, we're at a competitive disadvantage
Right.
by far.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, did I hear you state that we have a commitment from the Bureau, State Bureau of Aeronautics for $1.8 million towards this project?
Sorry, the batteries are dying, and apparently the formatting is not great right now. But
That's not just an
Sure.
estimate of what
Yeah.
we're going to apply for. That's a sum that has been committed to us?
essentially, yes. While the Bureau puts many things in their CIP for every airport in the state, nothing in a future year is ever guaranteed. Meaning they can't say, okay, in 3 years you have this in your CIP, whatever project that might be, and say, yes, we're going to fund that 100%. That might be something where the project gets pushed a year, gets pushed back a year, but the great part about our recent conversations with the Bureau is they understand this project's ready to go. It's not a project that's 3 years out. And so with the conversations that we've had, in fact, Supervisor Gabbert accompanied me down to Madison to visit with the Bureau back in April when we first kind of were pushing for at least the 1.25 million. And in fact, what I'll point out is that, well, what I'll point out is that Fond du Lac, Appleton, and Janesville all receive state funding on their projects, and there's a number of others that the terminal or that the Bureau has funded general aviation terminal buildings around the state. In fact, Shawano just got a new one. That's my hometown. Shawano's ahead of Oshkosh. So, 1.8 million. Yes, it is anticipated on this project. Well, you could call the Bureau tomorrow and ask, is that 100% stone cold lock? Take it to the bank tomorrow, they will tell you no, because they'll tell you no with any future project of any type for any airport. They cannot tell you that, yes, next year you have the 1.8 million, take it to the bank. However, we have as close to that as possible as any other airport could have in the state. So we do have 1.8 sitting in our CIP. In fact, that number has been slightly growing recently every time I look at the revised version that the Bureau sends out with the CIP. And if that money just continues to grow, then that's a good thing. However, every time we talk, they're trying to find as much money for us as possible. They've had great relationship with the Bureau. They've been very receptive to this project and knowing that it's a need for the airport, a big need. And it's a need that, why you don't see federal funds attached to this project, it's a need that federally speaking isn't typically very eligible for the general types of federal funds. So yes, we do have the 1.8 million from the state. It's in our CIP. It's earmarked for the project. I have no reason to believe we won't receive that grant funding while the construction is ongoing.
Okay, we have a timeline for the construction, and we've learned that the cost of delaying a project is going to increase the cost of the project. Now, that means that we are essentially guaranteeing that 1.8 million, because if it doesn't come through, then we will need to borrow that 1.8 million.
Well, excuse me, I would say this, the funding request to the county board in December is $3.9 million in additional funding to what's already been appropriated. That means we'd have $5 million to put towards the project. If for some reason the state's funding didn't come through, that would be in front of the county board yet again to make a motion on and act upon if we're going to fully fund the project through more county funding. However, I don't like to put odds on anything, but I would say it's a very, very, very much, it's a project that they intend to fund.
Oh, I understand that it is anticipated that we will get the $1.8 million grant, but it's not guaranteed. My second question is, going back through the previous rendition of the terminal, and the newspaper accounts for that, I tripped across an article that said that the previous 2016 rendition was something like 18,000 square feet. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Or was it always 12.5?
As of 2016, the design was finished at 12,500 square feet. The Facilities Committee, I've read all the minutes, right? I've all read all the minutes.
Okay.
I've watched all the videos. I've tried to get as up to speed as possible. 2013 was the time we began the conceptual design phase. And actually, Omni Associates, their architectural division was, so a different architect, was asked to put together a conceptual design. That started out as about 21,000 square feet, if my memory is correct. And that was in 2013. So between 2013, 2014, 2015, that was just, I think, talked about a lot. We were looking at various different options. I think 21,000 square feet obviously is too large. We have, between the terminal and the West Wing, currently we have about 40,000 square feet of floor space. So we're taking everything that we do in 40,000 square feet of floor space, albeit a lot of it's unused most of the time now. We're taking that and whittling it down to 12,000 square feet. But the history on the project is that at around the 2013 timeframe, 2014 timeframe, it would have been at around plus a little bit over 20,000 square feet for the new building. That was a completely different design than this. And then we went out for selection in the early part of 2016, selected Martin Riley, which is a local architect here, who has had some aviation experience, which is good. And we selected them to put together a design. That design ultimately ended at the very end of 2016 at 12,500 square feet.
Now, the cost for the program for the terminal in 2016 was $5.5 million, and the projected cost is $6.8 million today.
Correct. So the total project cost, which includes, of course, demolition, site work, all the things I've talked about earlier. Yes, $5.5 million in fall of 2017 was the funding request to the county board, I believe, and that didn't get approved. I won't really talk more about why it didn't get approved. However, it didn't get approved. 5.5 becomes 6.8 3 years later. That's just, nothing's cheap these days to build new construction. I mean, you talk about, and Mike can talk to this. I mean, you talk about what tariffs and steel prices have done, and you talk about all these other things that are thrown on. Had we built this 2 years ago, it would have been cheaper.
Well, the interest rates are still down, and I appreciate the work that you're doing and the confidence that you are building up in the board reconsidering this issue.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, but a comment first. First, thank you for presenting this and your due diligence on getting this project started, because I know when I first started in 2016, it was being talked about, and still it's being 2016 it's still being talked about. So I'm glad to see some progress being made on this, and the fact that you've secured basically the 1.8 million will definitely help with this project. It's been said a lot that the unemployment rate is down and the economy is doing great, but people are having a hard time finding workers to fill their spots. So cities, counties, the state is doing everything in its power to attract people to their communities, and I think this is a step in the right direction. You said businesses, organizations, if we want them to invest in our community, we need to show them that we're willing to invest in ourselves first, and I think this is the right direction. So thank you, and I would like to see this go forward. My question to you is, I'm on the IS committee, and I just want to ask how, have you worked closely with the IS department to ensure, everything in that side is being done correctly?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate the comments and the question, because yes, the answer is yes. We've worked with IS on this project, I think, for a number of years. One of the big lacking pieces of infrastructure to the airport right now is fiber. And so, right, I mean, I can attest to it every single day, and not a knock to our IS department, but we're kind of off in no man's land over there at the airport because we don't have a fiber connection. And the backup kind of systems that we've been limping along on until we have some replacement, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put fiber into a building that may or may not be there in the future. I say may or may not because the funding request is still in front of the county board. That being said, yes, there is a plan to get fiber to the new facility. That's included in that cost. That's a substantial cost, and it's I think the last we looked was about $50,000. And so right now, though, I mean, the IT is just, it's tough. I mean, because we're not on like a hard, and this is where I don't pretend to know what Patty does and their staff, and I'm not the IT guy by any means, so there's your disclaimer. But we're not hardwired into a reliable type of network connection, and so many things that we do at the airport can't be done quite as efficiently when we have things that just aren't reliable, IT or otherwise. And so that's one thing that's included in the new facility that's going to be a huge added bonus to our efficiency of running the airport.
Great, and that's good to hear because I know we've talked a lot on our committee about fiber and trying to get the airport connected. And I appreciate you working with IS because I know in the past we've had projects or people who have kind of left IS in the dark, and I think it's really important that for logistical reasons and just to be as efficient as possible that we're including them. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for your presentation. I just have a couple things to say. One, this is an investment in our future, and I just want to make sure that we're remembering that sustainability considerations are also an investment in our future. And if the costs aren't there, let's just kind of keep in mind if they can make it sustainable ready, so that when costs do come down, and we can then install at that time in a later phase. I do want to say that I do appreciate the consideration for scalability and expandability. I'm hoping those are real words. The ultimate goal is success, and if we're successful, I'd like to see more tenants coming in and more opportunities for utilization with this. This is an alternative to the increasingly the more busy traffic up in ATW with their commercial flights. So for businesses, I'm thinking we're going to be offering an alternative that will be easier in and out for folks that don't have to schedule as much around commercial flights. So I think that's good. And then the last thing that I want to throw at you is just make sure we're remembering the other cities around the county. Make sure we're reaching out to Fox Crossing, Menasha, Neenah, and seeing how we can get them in here to utilize this space too. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker, Supervisor Warnke, followed by Supervisor Finch.
I just want to mention a few things that really haven't been covered tonight, and the benefits of doing this project. I've been involved in this for many years since it started. First of all, we should be able to eliminate at least one and probably two parking lots, which is going to open up a lot of land. And it could be for hangars, it could be for businesses. And the second one is the utility savings that we're going to get. We pay a tremendous amount of money in that terminal now. I think I want to say something like $140,000, $160,000 a year.
77,000 on an annual basis.
77. And then, but does that include the stormwater runoff?
That number is simply building utilities. There is an added cost to stormwater runoff fees that we do pay on all impervious surface for the airport. Sorry.
Okay. And now it's also by ripping this old terminal building down, we're opening up some pretty prime land out there. I mean, it's like lakefront property. It's been referred to as that. And that would open it up for possible businesses that could move in there. Maybe a restaurant, it could be a number of things. Let's see, we could get new businesses in there. Another thing is it's going to open up a lot of land for hangars if we would decide to put them over there. That's pretty much what I'm going to cover, but there is a lot of savings in there, and it would open up a lot of things. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions. Is the Whitman Oshkosh Regional Airport, is that the name of this facility?
The name of the airport is the Whitman Regional Airport, yes.
All right. Well, why is Oshkosh here then?
It's in Oshkosh.
Okay. Reason I'm asking,
Physically is
Supervisor
within
Lentz
Oshkosh.
brought up something, and
We have a
he's
name
right
out in the
because
industry.
Oshkosh is getting the celebrity on it, but Nina Menasha Village Fox Crossing. Could we not change the name to Winnebago's Regional Airport? This way it's taking care of all the municipalities that's footing the bill for this airport.
Sure. The name of the airport, I don't know that that's in question, and it's not on the agenda today. In fact, I don't believe that's my presentation. That being said, it used to be the Winnebago County Airport.
Right.
Right. It was renamed the Whitman Regional Airport in honor of Steve Whitman. That's a pretty important name around here, and it's a pretty important name in the industry for going way, way back. However, what I'll say when you see Whitman Regional Airport, Oshkosh on our letterhead, on the slides, if you say Oshkosh in the aviation community, that's what they know. Respectfully, they don't know Nina, they don't know Menasha. So it's more of a marketing tool for the airport than anything. But the official name of the airport is the Whitman Regional Airport. Oshkosh simply happens to be on letterhead, simply happens to be on titles for presentations, and we don't overlook the fact that Nina and Menasha and Fox Crossing and others are in the county. So is Omro.
I'm talking Winnebago County now, not forget about the cities, Winnebago County.
Sure.
They're the ones that foot the bill for all this.
Understood.
Thank you, sir.
Just simply pointing out why Oshkosh is shown.
You said it right there.
Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder.
I'd like to thank Jim for the presentation tonight, and I'd also like to commend the committee for staying with this. I know when we voted it down, it'd been easy to give up and just say, well, we'll go with the west part of the building and let it go at that. You stuck with it. This project is long overdue. You look at like Oshkosh Truck, they basically talked about that long after we were talking about this. That building is built and the people are working there. And here we are tonight talking about it again. I think next on the 17th, it's time to move this project forward and begin having Winnebago County back in the airline, basically, business. I mean, we basically used to be a leader in it, and now we have nothing. I mean, we have a rundown terminal and a west wing that needs to be rebuilt, and we have to show the community that we're going to commit to this, and we'll be around in the future.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Seeing no other call-ins, that'll conclude our presentation. Thank you very much, Director Schell. Very much appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, we have one more presentation this evening, and that's from the Parkview Health Center in regards to additional funding for neighborhood range hoods for home-like dining. And for that, we have our Parkview Administrator, Marlia Keeler-Grahek. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Marlia Coiler. I'm the administrator at Parkview Health Center, and I have Kathy Ransom here. She's our Food and Nutrition Services Manager. And tonight we'll be providing you information about changes to our meal service at Parkview to provide a more home-like and resident-centered dining experience. So to give you some background about what we'll be talking about today and what brings us here today, so our current meal service equipment is reaching the end of its life, so we need some replacement food delivery system. And we definitely have an opportunity to provide a more home-like neighborhood meal service. A major component of the project is installing commercial-grade range hoods in each of our neighborhoods, which we did budget for installation in 2019. However, when an architect reviewed those plans, we're going to need to accommodate some additional funds for the installation of those range hoods. Our plan is to have those funds come from our Parkview fund balance, and I'll be going into each of those points a little bit more in depth as we go along. So I'll give some background on our current equipment and process that we use. So these are pictures of our current, we call them retherm carts and docking stations that we have on each of our neighborhoods. So the picture on the left is a picture of the actual cart, and those are loaded in our main kitchen in our lower level, and that's where everything is prepared currently, and then brought up to the neighborhoods and connected to the docking stations, which is that picture on the right there. And those are docked in what we call our neighborhood pantry areas. And the docking stations keep the hot side of the cart hot and the cold side of the cart cold. And when it's time for meals, the staff take the trays out. Everything's already pre-portioned, served up on those trays, and the staff then serve the residents from those trays in the neighborhood dining rooms. So that's a picture of the cart in the docking station in our neighborhood pantry. And as you can see, hopefully from the picture, that it's very large and very bulky. So the current units are over a decade old. The carts and docking stations have been in operation since the new Parkview building was built in 2008, and they're reaching the end of their life. The parts are being very difficult to find. They're becoming obsolete, and we even have one cart right now that we can't use because we can't find replacement parts. To repair the carts and docking stations is also expensive. Over the years, we've spent almost $30,000 for maintenance and repair, and that will only continue to increase as that equipment ages. So in 2008, we spent $265,000 just for the retherm carts and the docking stations. And we looked into if we were to replace the current system that we use today, what that would cost. And for the newer versions of our current system, it would cost about $443,000. And that's, again, just for the carts and the docking stations. We would also need to replace all of the equipment that goes with those. So that includes the high heat domes that we need for that equipment. That would be an additional about $4,000. The high heat trays that go along with the carts, that would be about $16,500 plus freight. And there's a lot of accompanying disposable supplies that goes with the current system that we use, which is a recurring annual cost that we've been seeing and we would continue to see if we were to implement this same system. So that disposable lid on the left there, that covers a lot of bowls and different things on the carts, and it's high heat, and we spend about $4,000 on those a year. The top picture of those paper boats, we use those for specific things with the system, and that costs about $565 a year. And the foil sheets, the picture on the bottom right, those go over every single plate for every single meal, every single day, and those cost about $3,000 a year. And not to mention these items go into the garbage every day, so our current system is not the most eco-friendly. So the cost to replace the current system, again, I talked about just the equipment itself, the carts, docking stations, trays, and domes, altogether would be about $464,000 to replace that, plus those annual recurring costs of the disposable products, as well as the maintenance and work that we've been doing to the carts is an additional about $10,000 a year. So we're at the point where we need to replace our food service equipment, and so it's the perfect opportunity to change up what we're doing to make some room for improvement. So while the current system that we use with our retherm carts, it did meet our need for the meal service, is not the most home-like experience for our residents or our staff. We're dealing with those big bulky carts. It limits the alternative choices for residents who say didn't want the main entree for that meal. And there's no kitchen-like aromas coming from the neighborhood. So our goal is to transition to more neighborhood-based cooking and to combat some of those challenges that that we see with our current system. So this isn't exactly what it would look like on our neighborhoods, but as you can see from the picture, someone's in the kitchen actually cooking a meal on the neighborhood, and the residents are there enjoying maybe the smells, chatting with the staff person cooking the meal. Sometimes they can help with the prep work. So it's just a whole better experience for the residents. Nursing facilities who already practice neighborhood-based meal prep and service see all sorts of benefits for residents. Again, I talked about the aromas of cooking food is very important. It's shown to increase resident appetites and just provide an overall more enjoyable dining experience. It also cues residents with dementia that it's actually mealtime and time to sit down to eat, and it's been shown to increase their intake as well. It provides for more flexibility for our residents and staff, so we'd be able to provide more open dining times, allowing residents to dine at times per their own preference, not when we say mealtime is. So say we could have breakfast from 7:30 to 9:30, that with that open mealtime dining, and staff don't need to be rushed to get the residents in the dining room by 8 o'clock. Residents can sleep in and not have to worry about missing that main mealtime. It also allows for more food options for the residents. Currently, we need to know their selection ahead of time if they wish for something other than what the main entree is. But with the neighborhood cooking, we'd be able to provide more options for alternatives without needing to know ahead of time. So we could grill them up a cheeseburger or grilled cheese or pizza or something to that effect. And it allows for that more real-time decision-making for the residents about what they want for that meal. So this is a picture of our current kitchen setup. The kitchen's already pretty conducive to neighborhood-based cooking with the addition of certain equipment that we would need. We would continue to cook our bulk main food entree items in our kitchen in our lower level, and we would still transport that portion up to the neighborhood, and we would look at a cart such as this for transporting that. And the cost for all of the neighborhoods, again, we have 8, for that many carts would cost about $17,500. The islands are on wheels, so they're really easy to move around how we want to set up the neighborhood. So we can now push them against the wall by our pantry where there are outlets for these food warming trays that we would purchase for, again, for the bulk main entree that we would do. The cost for all neighborhoods for that would be about $8,300. And as I said previously, the main component of this project is the commercial grade range hoods, and obviously the most expensive portion of the project as well. And these are needed to meet life safety code requirements for what they call corridor cooking. And the cost of that for installation and everything needed for those would be about $300,000. So as you can see from the picture there, that's a current picture of our stove and microwave on the neighborhood. So the range hoods would go above the stove where the microwave and cabinets are. Those would obviously be removed and fitted for the range hoods. So the total cost of transition to the neighborhood-based cooking for the main equipment that we would need with the range hoods, warming pans, and transport carts, we'd be looking at around $326,000, so significantly less expensive than if we were to just transition to what we're currently using in a newer version. Also, we'd anticipate less in annual maintenance and inspections. So we'd look for the inspections of the hood fans, which is again is the main component, is about $2,500 per year. Obviously, there'd probably be a little bit more with just general wear and tear for the carts and whatever else, but we wouldn't anticipate anything near the current $10,000 that we're spending yearly on that stuff. Oops. So again, in 2019, we did budget for $110,000 for installation of the commercial grade hood fans. Again, after the architect reviewed the project, he estimated around $300,000 for the actual cost. So main components of the increase in cost with that is grease traps that the city is saying we need to install in the neighborhoods if we're going to be doing more cooking up on the neighborhoods. So that was the main component of what made that more expensive. And also just space modifications that we'll need, so cabinetry, electrical, drywall, things like that. And again, the plan is to take that additional $190,000 for the project from our own Parkview fund balance, so we wouldn't be bonding for that or anything. And again, in summary, so we need a replacement food delivery system with our current meal service equipment reaching its end of life. We have an opportunity to provide a more home-like neighborhood meal service, as well as a cost savings with the new system. We need that additional $190,000 for installation of those commercial-grade hood fans, and the plan is for that to come from our Parkview fund balance. And we would bring this through our committees and to the county board, and the plan would be first in December. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. So we'll open up for questions. So I see a couple of call-ins. First, I'll call on Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did this by page number, and I know you don't have pages, but number one, range hoods, these are like where we, in our homes, we have lights and exhaust fan. That's what you're talking about, range hoods?
Correct, but they are commercial grade.
And you don't have them now because why?
Because we currently don't do any cooking up on the neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yep. Everything's done downstairs in our kitchen.
And down there, they do have range hoods. It's just you're going to be cooking upstairs, you need range hoods. Okay.
Correct, yep.
And then on page 3, are there any green alternatives for all those disposable products that we go through? Some of it's paper, some of it is what are those lids were, some of it is that foil. Are there any green alternatives that you're aware of?
Maybe Kathy can speak to it better than I can, but I know for the system currently that we're using, it's high heat, so they have to meet that high heat grade or whatever it may be. But that would be a purpose too, to moving away from that, so we can get rid of that stuff.
That would be a what?
What's that? That would be the purpose of getting rid of that current system, because we do use so many of those disposable products.
Okay, so with the new system, you'd be able to.
We wouldn't use any of that.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. The range hoods, how long is their life expectancy to be in use for? You know?
Gosh, Mike, did you happen to catch that at all?
Dr. Elder's in the back. I believe he's going to answer.
They're a range guard type system where they've got the fire extinguishing system in there and everything. It's like a commercial grade one. I'm estimating, 10 to 20 years easily. We've got the range hoods in like the jail, and that's almost 20 years now, and we haven't had a problem with them.
And I know you can't anticipate the future, but you would say that for the next 10, 20 years, the parts to replace any parts that need to be replaced could be found somewhat easily? Can you answer that?
I know more facilities are going to this type of neighborhood-based cooking, so I think the odds of it continue to be produced is very likely. I think with this system too, from my understanding, there's less parts to be replaced than what our current carts use, so.
Fan motor and
Yeah.
chemicals, and if we don't have a fire in the kitchen, we'll never use the chemicals.
The $190,000 is coming from your fund balance
Correct.
already, right?
Yep.
So it's already technically in our funds. So let me ask you, how soon can we get this to the county board and approve of this? That's my answer. Maybe you can't answer that. I'd like someone to answer that, because I think it sounds great. I think our costs, we go from $10,000 to $2,000 for the annual cost. I think it gives more choices. I think it should be done, and I just want to know how soon we can do it, so thank you.
Our plan would be to bring it to Parkview Committee in December, as well as PNF, and then County Board in December as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Weiss, followed by Supervisor Albrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, I'm right here. I have a question that probably more on my own memory. It seems to me that I recall when the discussion on the CBRF, which is just down the street from you, was being built, which is going to come online probably in January, as I recall, that you folks would be doing the meal preparation for that. Is that in here too? I don't know if you need new docking stations for that, or is that going to be something that we're going to have to address later too?
Nope, that shouldn't affect our service for the CBRF at all. Those meals would just be made down in our kitchen, correct? And they would be picking those up daily, so that shouldn't affect anything with this process.
Okay, will you have a cart for that?
I believe they're purchasing, or no, we have current carts that they're using. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiss. Next speaker, Supervisor Albrecht.
How many patients do we have that aren't direct pay?
That are not private pay?
Yes.
We usually run about 60, 65%. that are on Medicaid. But then we also have our insurance plans of people who are on Medicare for their short-term stays and then their insurances as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker, Supervisor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you anticipate that there'll be any additional staffing costs by moving to this neighborhood kitchen cooking model versus the current?
We don't anticipate any additional staffing costs. Our plan, as we said, was to still continue to cook most of those bulk items for that main meal downstairs in our kitchen. So our 3 cooks that we have right now would pretty much be downstairs in our kitchen, but we also have 8-ish food service assistants on daily, and our plan with them would be to have them up on the neighborhoods helping with that specific meal service. So we don't anticipate any additional staffing.
Thank you, Supervisor Joyce. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the presentation. Thank you both for being here tonight and for your information.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Okay, so that concludes our 2 presentations for this evening. So the next items on the agenda are the zoning reports and ordinances. First one is report number 001, Donna M. and Jason T. Bellis, Town of Winchester. I'll call on Supervisor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the adoption of report number 001.
There's a motion and a second to approve report number 001. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to a mandatory ordinance number 1101-2019, rezoning from A2 General Agriculture Wetland to A2 General Agriculture without wetland for tax parcel number 028-0302-02. I'll once again call on Supervisor Joyce.
Thank you. I move for approval of a mandatory ordinance number 11/01/2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve amendatory ordinance number 1101-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item, that's amendatory ordinance number 1102-19, Town of Clayton, on behalf of Kevin Hoppy, rezoning from A2 General Agriculture to R1 Rural Residential for tax parcel number 006-0849-01. I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of amendatory ordinance number 11-219.
Second. There's a motion and a second to approve amendatory ordinance number 1102-19. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item. That's a mandatory ordinance number 1103-19. Town of Clayton, on behalf of Jack Borchert, rezoning from R2 Suburban Residential and A2 General Agricultural to I2 Heavy Industrial for tax parcel numbers 006-0317-01 and 006-0318-02. I'll call on Supervisor Youngquist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of amendatory ordinance number 110319.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve amendatory ordinance number 110319. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the final zoning report and ordinance item. That's amendatory ordinance number 110419. Town of Oshkosh, on behalf of Brett Gelbach, rezoning from A2 General Farming to B3 General Business for tax parcel numbers 018-0414-05 and 018-0408-01. I'll call on Supervisor Gabbert.
I move for approving of a mandatory ordinance number 11/04/19.
There's a motion and a second to approve a mandatory ordinance number 110419. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that concludes the zoning reports and ordinances. So we'll move right down to resolutions and ordinances. First one is resolution number 233-112019, commendation for Steve Dougherty. I will call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 233-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve. Please proceed, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Steve Dougherty started as a seasonal bridge tender in July 1982, and in January 1983 obtained a regular position as an investigator for the Child Support Office. He accepted a lateral transfer to a child support specialist handling substitute care matters in 2010 and remained in that position until November 1 of this year. Steve was very fun to work with, and even though he looked like a big, tough guy, he was a kind, gentle, and has a very big heart. He was knowledgeable in his work and would help others in any way he could. Steve was grounded, professional, and seasoned in his work and has a terrific work ethic. We thank Steve for his many years of service to Winnebago County and wish him the best in his retirement.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. There was a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're moving on down to the next item. That's resolution number 234-112019, commendation for Jeffrey Bellin. I'll once again call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you. I move for resolution 234-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second. Please go ahead.
With 31 years of service to the citizens of Winnebago County, Jeffrey Bellin retired from the Sheriff's Office on November 1, 2019. Jeff began his career in 1988 as a substitute corrections deputy and became a full-time deputy in 1989. In 1991, he transferred to the Patrol Division. While in patrol, Jeff was a member of the SWAT team and enjoyed complex investigative work and evidence handling. As a result, he was later promoted to the positions of detective and detective sergeant. Jeff assisted with many high-profile investigations and received several accolades for his work. In 2019, he transferred to the Corrections Division, where he remained until his retirement. Jeff's law enforcement knowledge and experience enabled him to serve as a resource for many of the younger deputies. Jeff's lengthy record of service is both commendable and appreciated. Please join me in expressing our gratitude.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. There was a motion and a second to approve the commendation for Jeffrey Bellin. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 235-11-2019. Approve a 4-year agreement with the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance to administer the implementation of the Winnebago Waterways Program. I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of Resolution 235-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 235-11-2019. Any discussion?
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Please, go right ahead, Supervisor Fari.
First of all, I want to thank the committee for their unanimous support of this resolution. A little background, these agreements are 1-year agreements. However, they're pretty close to coming forward with the completed lake management plan. Once that is done, and it's supposed to be done by the end of the year, then they're going to go into applying for grants and the implementation of those grants. The focus here is that these grants are large grants, and it takes years to actually implement them over to achieve the goal. So it's obviously advantageous to ensure that we have an agreement with them longer term than 1 year to achieve those goals. But once again, I want to thank the committee. They did a great job of supporting this. And also we have the approval of the Winnebago Waterways Committee, which is the executive committee that meets, about every 3 or 4 months in Fond du Lac, and that's Calumet County, Fond du Lac County, and Winnebago County. They have also agreed that this is a good resolution for all the counties to achieve the goals.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Seeing no other call-ins, we did have a motion and a second, so we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 236-11-2019. authorize the Winnebago County Land and Water Conservation Department to accept a natural resource damage assessments grant in the amount of $21,000 for the 2020 budget and appropriate the funds to related expenses. I'll once again call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of Resolution 236-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve Resolution number 236-11-2019. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
If you have any questions specific to the grant, I believe Mr. Davies could answer that for you.
Very good. We'll open it. We did have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on, thank you very much for being here, Director Davies. We'll move on to the next resolution. That's resolution number 237-11-2019. Authorize a capital project for the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh Fox Cities campus for roof repairs at a cost of $50,000, funded with an advance from the general fund to be reimbursed from subsequent bond issue. I'll call on Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the adoption of resolution number 237-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 237-11-2019. Any discussion?
If there are any questions, Joanne Reif is in the back and can answer them.
Very good. Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 238-11-2019. Authorize a transfer of $22,000 from the Winnebago County Property Listers Fund Balance to the Winnebago County Property Listers Health Insurance Account. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of resolution number 238-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 238-11-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next page. Next resolution is number 239-11-2019. Authorize the Public Health Department to accept grants and donations from two separate grant programs totaling $185,000 and appropriate the funds to program expenses. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. I move to approve of resolution 239-11-2019.
There's a motion and a sec to approve resolution number 239-11-2019. And just a note that a friendly amendment to correct the vote or to add the vote of Board of Health, which was 8-0.
No.
That's the next one? I apologize. Okay. There was a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to inquire whether this application for grants will reduce the levy funding for the expenses in that department. It states on line 23 that the funds will be appropriated to program expenses, but will these be new expenses that were not budgeted? Is this above and beyond, or is this going to replace?
I'm going to call on our Finance Director Fitzgerald to answer that question, please.
These are new expenses because we didn't know this grant was coming in, so the revenues are coming in, but they're going to be covering the expenses that we are going to incur. So they are new. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so now are we going to hire more people with that money? Or are we going to buy more equipment, or what is it going to be used?
And I do have the Director Gearin back there as well, but I do believe there is going to be a new position, which there's another resolution for a TO change for the suicide prevention grant piece of that. But Doug, Director Gearin, if you wouldn't mind.
Please go ahead, Director Gearin.
Elaborating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, to answer your question, the funding for the suicide prevention grant is a new grant that we recently accepted, or were awarded in partnership with the new mental health connection. It will fund for 3 years, it will fund a adult suicide prevention coordinator. We'll actually be placing that position upon approval with 2 other staff that are currently also working with New Mental Health Connection on youth suicide work. And then the opioid funding is a funding source that was extended from last year into this year with additional funds, and we don't anticipate at this point creating a position out of that, but that funding will help fund activities related to data collection and partner work, and it actually may help support some existing staff. That is yet to be determined.
Okay, so then basically, the funds coming in are going to fund additional expenses from what we have approved for the 2020 budget.
Be levy neutral, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Green, and thank you, Director Fitzgerald. Seeing no other call-ins, we did have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 239-11-2019. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 240-11-2019. Authorize the Public Health Department to accept a federal drug-free communities grant in the amount of $145,833 and appropriate the funds to program expenses. I'll once again call on Supervisor Norton.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 240-11-2019. This is a committee vote, like the chairman said, was 8-0, voted on earlier this evening. This is a grant that we just got last week, and I want to thank the Personal Finance Committee to take it up very quickly. Any questions, you can ask Doug in the back.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. So it's a friendly amendment to add that vote of 8-0. There was a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 241-11-2019. Support the adoption of a statewide bill to incorporate e-cigarettes and vaping into the Clean Indoor Air Law, presently SB 442. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 241-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 241-11-2019. We'll open it up for discussion. I see one calling, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out that I think that this resolution has some misleading facts. First off, the chemicals they state in the resolution are simply not prominent enough to pose a risk to public health. E-cigarette aerosol, they state on lines 27 and 28, nicotine, heavy metals, ultrafine particles are only trace amounts and nowhere remotely close compared to inhaling cigarette. Most of the toxic chemicals they state in this resolution are virtually completely filtered out when exhaled. The two chemicals they state in line 23 of the resolution, diacetyl and 2,3-penendentione, I had to pronounce that one, are not present in exhaled vapor from e-cigarettes. Those are only chemicals found in some select flavors, and all of it is absorbed by the user, meaning it is not present in secondhand vapor. Particles from vaping, which are liquid rather than solid like smoke particles, don't seem to affect air quality to any significant matter. And there's been some studies to back that up. In a 2017 University of California, San Diego study that studied the air in 193 low-income family homes, these researchers found that smoking regular cigarettes, cooking, burning candles, all affected particle counts in the home, but vaping, which happened in 43 of these homes, had no measurable effect on the indoor air quality. Even the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, which is a CDC agency, found that even in a shop where 13 customers vaped throughout the entire day, the flavoring chemicals and formaldehyde were all below the limits allowed, meaning that it was not a risk to public health. And nicotine was practically absent from their samples. Yes, ever so slight carcinogen levels were present, but it was not prominent enough to pose a public health risk. You would see a higher risk in smoke from a well-done steak in the kitchen. In February of 2019, Public Health England published a 264-page study available that talks about the risks of vaping and secondhand vapor. And there has been no identified health risks of passive vaping to bystanders. Unlike cigarettes, there is no side stream vapor emitted by an e-cigarette into the atmosphere, just the exhaled aerosol, which is still not prominent. And lastly, according to Drexel University toxicology expert Igor Burstin, while the contents of the e-cig vapors inhaled by users justified surveillance, there's still so little contamination in exhaled vapor that there is unlikely to be any risk. The state in their study, there was no evidence of potential for exposure of e-cigarette users to contaminants that are associated with risk to health at a level that would warrant attention if it were an involuntary workplace exposure. The vast majority of predicted exposures are below 1% of the threshold limit value. So I'll just sum this up. This is not a risk to public health, period. It's more of a matter of etiquette, yes. So, I mean, if obviously concerns of the family, friends, employees, and customers need to be respected. If someone objects, vapor should be courteous and thoughtful and take it outside. But I don't think that a matter of etiquette should be a matter of law. So I advise the county board not to be fooled by this and vote against this and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker, Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the legislative committee give us an idea of why this was brought to us because it looks like this is another one that is out of our jurisdiction? Thank you.
I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was brought to us by another county, like I said earlier. I think that's some of the reasons they brought it. And then we talked quite a bit about it. The health department has been talking about it, and so that's why it come up in our committee. And I'll tell you, it was very strong in our committee that it should pass that way. And number one, I can tell you there was a girl right in Armrow, I can't tell you what was in her vaping and everything that you had just said, but she darn near died with it. Matter of fact, she just got out of the hospital and she'd been in there about a month. They didn't know if she was going to come out of it or not. She was put into it and it's really hurt her lungs, and when they did let her come home, she's still on oxygen. And I know the mother put something on there. If your children are there and had into the same vaping product as she did, make sure that you get it away from them. Like I said, I can't say what Supervisor Defferting did and what all was in there, whatever. I cannot. All I know is it was vaping. And so there was a lot of talk about that.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, and also Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't prepared to speak about this, but I felt the need to now after listening to Supervisor Defferting. You know, I think the intent of this bill and the resolution in general is to just bring more attention and awareness to, you know, vaping and e-cigarettes, because it doesn't seem like there's enough attention on the issue right now. UW Oshkosh has been, you know, kind of in the process of pushing here and there to make the campus a tobacco-free campus, which would include e-cigarettes and vaping, because they have seen the need to address the issue on campus, and I think it is one worthy of attention. You know, back before I was even born, smoking cigarettes was very common, whether that be, you know, in restaurants, in public places. It was, you know, just a common thing. People didn't think too much about it, but it wasn't until we actually had enough, you know, long-term evidence and enough time to see the negative effects that it had. And I think the same can be said about vaping and e-cigarettes. You know, we just simply don't have enough evidence and enough time to have looked at the long-term effects that this will have on people's health. So I think, you know, there is a real concern about the long-term effects that this will have on people's health, especially young people who have started this, who never decided to smoke a cigarette but went with vaping and are now, you know, using it on a regular basis. So I think there is a need to address this. One thing that, you know, isn't mentioned enough too is that people can use vaping products, e-cigarettes, I don't know what the term is, but the actual pen, I'll say, itself, to use other things besides nicotine products. They can use, you know, marijuana can be used, other THC products can be used in these without anyone knowing that they're being used, besides the smell. But, I think it's, an attempt to address that as well. So I think this is worthy of our attention, and I hope that we'll support this. We, had our legislators at our legislative meeting, who I think they seem to show some support. I don't want to speak in favor or speak for them, but it seemed like generally, this has some bipartisan support. So I hope we'll support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Seeing no other call-ins, I won't debate, but I'll just give you one fact. When I was driving here today, 25% of high school seniors have vaped in the last 30 days. So it's like tobacco smoking of a prior generation for our current generation. So, I see a couple other call-ins, so I spurred some debate. All right, I'll call on Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being an ex-smoker, and we started out junior high smoking, so yada, yada, yada. However, this vaping, to me, it's just going to be another way for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road that more people go back to smoking. And my opinion is this: not allow anything to this for a simple reason. 1 comes to 2, and 2 comes to 3, and 3 comes to 4. Once you open the door, hey, that was a thing. I didn't even realize I was doing that one. But anyway, once you open the door, you're going to have more and more people going back to smoking. It's going to make the tobacco companies very happy, but it's going to make the relations of these people very sad when they die because they were doing whatever. So I am totally against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Konecki.
Mr. Chairman, as your background and your doctorate in medicine, I hope I'm not out of order. I'd like to ask for your opinion on this.
Well, so first, I'll certainly give you my opinion. My background in terms of e-cigarettes, I would tell you, is not much better than everyone else in the public, to be honest. But I certainly do have an opinion. My opinion is something that Supervisor Wojciechowski was really referring to, meaning tobacco smoking been around for many, many years. There hadn't been a lot of studies demonstrating the ill effects of secondhand smoke for a long time. And it took a long time for us to convince ourselves through that scientific community that Supervisor Defferding was referring to before we really were confident that truly there were ill effects of secondhand smoke. Bottom line is, I don't want to wait that long for this situation. We have a generation here that I would argue is really, I would argue, under attack with vaping. It's a real effect, it's very addictive, and I don't want to wait to find out just how much ill effect, whether firsthand or secondhand, there may be.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on Supervisor Smith.
I quit smoking over 25 years ago. Took a heart attack to do it. But the idea of these cigarettes, vaping, they use electronic components. And anybody that has been around like soldering and welding electronic components has found that they've had problems with lungs. And you're taking in vapor using an electronic ignition, and I think that's going to cause a problem down the road. It doesn't make any difference what it's going through. You're just sucking something else into your lungs to screw them up.
Thank you, Supervisor Smith. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll attempt to do a voice vote on this. It does require 3/4, so if there's any question, we will go to a roll call. But all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Nay. I abstain. Motion carries, because I heard 3 or 4 votes, 3 or 4, and it requires 27. So motion carries by voice vote. All right, moving on down to the next item, and that is resolution number 242-11, 2019. Support the Wisconsin Register and Probate Association and urging the Wisconsin legislature to review Wisconsin statutes for court fees and costs in probate and juvenile cases. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of resolution number 242, 11/2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 242-11-2019. Any discussion? Anything further, Vice Chairman Egan?
Yes.
Please, go right ahead.
Now that I got your attention. I just wanted to say, this wasn't just brought in by our group, there was some other ones, but we did hold off for a meeting and had our clerk of courts come in. And she pushed very strongly for this. She thought it's time that this was done. And so our legislative committee more or less went along with her recommendation. She said it's time that we do that. So that's where, before we're asked where the legislative come up with this, is the recommendation of our own clerk of courts.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. There was a motion and a second, and I see no call-ins, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 243-11-2019. Authorize a policy for voting procedure. I'll call on Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of resolution number 243-11-2019.
There's a second?
And if I may, I just want to point some things out before maybe some other conversations come up about this. So just looking, first of all, let me bring up why we as a committee had brought this resolution forward. One, as it states in the resolution, that currently there's no standard rules and no procedure in place in our county rules about voting, and specifically voting devices. So we thought that, to streamline the process and just, have that there is something that maybe like your departments, the county board, kind of have something to look back on and say, well, this is the policy we have, so this is why we're doing this a certain way. Our hope is by doing this, we can bring more utilization to the iPads that we've already paid for and have budgeted to replace in the future, should some, be damaged or need to be replaced. The software that we use on the iPads for voting that many of us have been, starting to use more, is already available at no additional cost. So again, it's just incentivizing us to utilize this software that we already have more. And, hopefully this will be more sustainable by us having to use less batteries for the current voting things we have. And as they phase out, as their lifespan ends, we have something in place. We also threw in the provision, because a lot of people don't like to use the iPads or, electronic devices, and that's understandable. And we wanted to include that, you have a different option if you really don't want to use the county electronic device, which would be a voice vote. And I think in the case that the current, these voting bricks that we have, if those were not to work, you would have to defer kind of to a voice vote anyways. So it's just kind of being consistent with what we already have. Finally, like the resolution says, it specifically says electronic devices, county electronic devices. It doesn't specifically say the iPads because there is a chance that, we could use some other type of technology in the future. I do want to point out that this resolution has in it that it wouldn't take effect until April 2020 when the new board takes over. And this is an effort to allow people to adjust to the new system, should we change, and give them the time to work with the IT department, IS department, to become more familiar with and have their questions answered. But Patty is in the back if anyone has any other questions related to this. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is quite concerning, and this is not the first resolution we've had from the IT department specific to the iPads. I believe currently we are with the understanding that iPads are voluntary. If you want to use them, they're available. If you choose not to use them, we're using the system we have now. In addition to that, it is really wrong to impose a rule on a body that has not yet been elected, i.e. after April 2020. It should be the function of that body, the new supervisors or the current ones who wish to rerun, to address issues of this concern. In other words, we would be imposing this on a body that's not elected yet. I want to stress, once again, it's important that we keep these iPads voluntary. What we're really saying here is that a person who's elected after April 2020, if this is approved, would not be able to cast a recorded vote, only a voice vote. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, I will ask for a recorded vote on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
I urge everybody to not support this. This is just not a good idea.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank Aaron and your committee for bringing this in. I appreciate your diligence here, but I just don't happen to agree with it, which is fine, I guess, isn't it? Okay, to me, this is one of those where you're out looking for a problem that doesn't exist. You find one, you misdiagnose it, and then you apply the wrong remedy. It's like, it's not needed. Why are we doing this? Don't we have more important things to do? Again, though, I have a great deal of respect for the committee and for those that serve on it with every good intention. My intention is good as well. I believe this is another example where we have unintended consequences. I think that rules should be made and done to unite us, not divide us. This is discrimination, discrimination, discrimination. I so boldly, that is my opinion. Legislative bodies, which we are, have rules that protect the minority. Whether that's one person or, 15, whatever. Not obstruct them. I also suggest there's a couple of major flaws in this. One, as it says right in the resolution, this is a rule change. A rule change needs to come through a committee. It needs to have a 2/3 vote during the time of the year when we're not, other than the original organization meeting next April. So it should be ruled out of order there. Second, if you look at the resolution itself, at the bottom it says, approved by the county executive. The county executive does not make policy or board rules. Since when? Can you name any other rule that the county executive makes? It doesn't work that way, folks. The governor doesn't make rules for the assembly or the state senate. Maybe he should. Anyway, if you look at the federal government in D.C., there's a House and a Senate. The House uses a machine. They don't say, well, we'll use the machine unless you rather get up and say. No, it's one or the other. The United States Senate, they use a roll call vote on everything, including quorums. In the state legislature in Madison, state assembly uses a machine. The state Senate uses roll call votes. I did some research the last couple of days. I looked at legislative bodies, local at the state level, obviously the federal level, various states, and especially legislative bodies, county boards, county commissions. I cannot find one example of a rule like this anywhere. Why would we want to be the trendsetter in the United States of America to take rights away from members? I would suggest boldly, and again with respect, you don't have the right to take away my right to vote and represent my constituents. People that chose me to represent them should have a voice, and we should not say, no, you have to get up. And I think the chairman, at a committee meeting just recently, we discussed how this roll call vote thing can be misused, especially at the House level. You watch C-SPAN. If it's a really controversial vote, or a couple of years ago there was this vote in the United States Senate about what's called Obamacare. Remember, a certain senator waited out in the cloakroom until they came in at the end to see, oh, my vote really is needed, so I'll go along with the party on this, or I won't go along with the party on that. And they played games depending on whether they were for or against it. And John McCain, Senator John McCain, a great legislator, I would say, got pilloried because he did what he thought was right by voting publicly against the will of the party. And he waited till the end to see if his vote was needed or not, and it was. So for those reasons, and again, with all due respect to my friends on the committee, that this is just wrong. I think we should move on and work together, back things that can unite us, and eliminate things that divide us. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Norton.
My original request to speak was to point out that this is a procedural issue in that a committee can bring to the floor a change of rules, but if you look in your rules under voting and roll call 11.0, which is on page 35 of your directory, you'll see the whole procedure for voting. So if we would go ahead and vote on this, this ought to be incorporated into the rules. Not that you have to go through the committee. You don't have to go through the committee. It's a standard procedure to do that, but you can bring it to the floor and you can request the board to vote on it. But as Supervisor Wingren shared with us, it will take a 2/3 vote to pass this because it is establishing a rule, a change in the rules. That being said, I'll move on to the substantive element of this resolution. And I would oppose this on its substance because you are taking away from the assembled body, from the board, the alternative of rising to vote. Those who are in favor, if our equipment were to fail and you wanted to take a recorded vote, supervisors could rise from their chair in favor of an issue, or at the call of the chairman, they can oppose it, a nay vote. You can simply count heads. Another element of voting that is withheld from the board is a written ballot. We have written ballots when we vote for elected officers, when we're organizing the board, and on special occasions, we could have an occasion when we would require or desire to have a written ballot so that there is something that is tangible besides a recorded vote that may not be possible at the time. So for these procedural and substantive issues, I oppose this, and I would ask the chairman and the Corporation Council to declare that if we go ahead to vote on this, that it require a 2/3 majority, because it will in fact be a change in the rules.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I do think he is correct based on Rule 3.8, in between the organizational and then the next elected body, it does require a 2/3 vote. So I do believe you're correct. And so if it would come to a vote, that would be the basis for it. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, is this considered an electronic device that we can use? That's my first question. Or is it just this device? That's what I'm asking first. That's my first question. I'll ask that to Aaron or Patty or whoever can answer that question first. And the reason I'm asking that is because, if I understand this correctly, come next April, or even now, I guess, I don't have to use either one of these devices. I can just say yay or nay on every single vote. I can do that. Can I do that?
I don't know how I'd record.
I can't?
I don't know how I would record those.
And here's my premises, and Sue, thank you, that's what I'm saying. If you don't have electronic device, and if I want to say, let's say or anyone, or right now, I say, I don't want to use either one of these devices. Every single vote, I want to say yay or nay. Clerk just told me I can't do it because she can't record it down. So maybe that's why we should have electronic devices. Now, I do take a little issue with we can't force things on another board or a future board. First of all, Door County, a rural county, you know what you have to use? One of these. You know, I think we have other rules. Our initial rules, if I'm elected and we'll all come back next April, who are they prepared by? They're prepared by the Judiciary Committee of this board, not the next board. Okay? I also disagree. The day we meet. The day we meet is already set. Next April. That's a future board. Controlling when you meet the very first time. So we can do that to a future board. Now, the issue about, I know a couple of my colleagues are all bugabooed about these electronic devices, but I tell you, more and more county boards are going to these. I just told you, Door County a few years ago, they mandated it. You want to be on the county board? Here. You got to have one of these, and this is how you get your communications. Most county boards, I believe, county boards I'm talking about, use electronic voting system, something like this, I believe. I've watched Marathon, I've watched Rock County, they use this. I think that's the thing we have to go to. I think we have to get over this thing. Electronic devices either got to be this or this. I would like that feeling, but the voice thing, the clerk just said she can't record our vote. I think we should get rid of that. I think you should have one or two. If you don't use iPad, fine, but you have to use this. And we'll work on this. And I tell you, well, it takes 2/3 votes this time, or right now. Come next April, we could change it, the rules, and it takes a majority. But I'm going to disagree very vehemently with my colleagues to say you can't make another county board, a future county board do it because it's done. It's been done in the past by other county boards in the state and otherwise. So we're not the first, as someone indicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
I guess one of my biggest concerns would be if we went this system. There's no charging stations on these where we're sitting. You know, when we did the budget hearing, I came here, my phone was at 100%. When I left, it was dead. I was using the one that was furnished me on my spot here. You know, you can change the batteries in this, but when my phone went dead, I was done voting. There's no charging station here. We budgeted for 4 iPads this year. There's 36 of them here. They're all aging. The batteries, you and I both know, as they get older, they last less. At the budget hearing, both of my colleagues, theirs were just about basically dead too. So what are we going to do when it takes us 9 years to replace these iPads? We got no charging stations. We're in a budget session, and the batteries all start going dead after 5 or 6 hours. Now what do? We're done voting. We call it a day because we got to go home and charge our iPads. So I think if we're going to go a route like that, you have to have charging stations. You have to have updated equipment. You can't just make a rule change and just think what you furnish just is going to last forever. You know, it's like the vehicles in the fleets, that they have to be replaced. These iPads have to be replaced, but yet we could only find the money to buy 4 of them this year. So if you're going to go that route, you got to put some money in it. You got to put some charging stations. It's not fair if I forget to charge my iPad or I leave it in my car and the battery, I come here with 25%, and now it's my fault because I can't only vote for 2 hours and it's a 6-hour meeting. You know, there's no charging station here. I ought to be able to at least charge my iPad if that's the only thing I'm going to have to use.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to hope to deconstruct some of the things that were said. First, to Mr. Binder's point, just because that was the most recent one. So that's actually, you bring up a good point, and that's something the committee has been talking about. You know, we're looking at our next meeting to talk about, as I mentioned at the budget hearing, some type of replacement plan for the iPads. And when we've talked about that, what was included in those discussions was charging, like portable charging units. And, you know, we've had these discussions, but to us, the conversation that came up was, well, we can't really talk about that if we're not utilizing the iPads. So we thought that bringing this forward first would be a better way to have us utilize those iPads so we can justify saying, okay, well, now that the county board is actually using them, we have a need to buy these products and actually fund them. So that was kind of my point to address that. You know, some of the comments that were made about taking away someone's voting, you know, ability, that, you know, that's just completely false and misleading. I'm sorry, but that's just incorrect. When we come into a meeting every month, we vote on issues. How do we vote? We vote with this. And to answer your question, I would probably classify this as a county electronic device. It's something that we pay for, is used through the county budget, I believe. And it's something that we use to vote. The difference between this and this, there's not really a big difference besides that they're both county electronic devices, and we're trying to be consistent instead of using half of us using the brick and half of us using the iPad. You know, we paid for these iPads, and I think we should be utilizing them more, because if we're not using them to vote or read our agendas, you know, for the people who still use paper, you know, then what really are you using them for? Personal use? That's not really what they should be used for. They should be used for county purposes, one of those being voting on the issues. You know, I think this is an attempt, because eventually, you know, these are going to be phased out, whether that be through them not being compatible with software or not wanting to replace them over and over again. We're already putting forth a plan, or we will be, and we have already allocated money in budgets, past budgets, to replace these. So it's not taking your way to vote away. It's just putting something more consistent in place. And, you know, maybe this is because of the specific language in the resolution, but the attempt is, you know, to give you the opportunity to vote on these county electronic devices how we normally would with roll call. But if you don't want to use that device, you still have the option to vote, and that would be determined. You know, we put voice vote, and maybe that was too constraining, but the idea behind it was you still have that alternative, and that would be given to the chair. So, for example, someone could say, you know, we've had times where someone accidentally voted the wrong way, and they said, actually, can you change that vote? And the clerk was able to do that. So that would still be an option for someone who doesn't want to use the device. They could say, okay, this is how I want to vote. So that's what we meant by voice vote. Maybe that was too constrained by the words, but, you know, Supervisor Eisen gave some alternatives, and I would welcome those. I think giving people that option to not use the device, you know, we're fine with that, and that's where the compromise, what we're trying to find is. What this resolution is attempting to do is make us use the iPads that we've paid for, that we have the software, and to actually use them, you know, as these phase out. I'm sure there's some other points I'm missing, but, you know, I really think this is us addressing an issue that's going to come up eventually, and we might as well get ahead of it before, you know, we're in a situation where we don't know what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker is Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd also like to thank Supervisor Eisen for bringing up those other potential ways of voting. I think it's important to acknowledge those. But I wanted to bring up the fact that I came here in regards to preparation for this. I came here with a pen and my memories of what we discussed in the committee. And here's what I want to say to folks in regards to technology. Right now, we are commonly using a clicker box. I mean, for those folks that remember what a clicker box is. And what's going to happen is the provider of this clicker box is going to come out with another generation. And that next generation is going to have bigger buttons or something like that. And at some point, they're going to have a slight little display screen. And then they're going to make that display screen a touch screen. And each time they come out with another generation, they're going to up another feature on here. And it won't be long before this clicker box turns into a tablet that is used for our voting system. And I can't say, because I can't predict the future, exactly what that's going to look like, but I can tell you based off of my understanding of technology and software that every time they release it, they need to have a selling point of why you want to buy this new device. And it will not be long before this device will look like a tablet. Now, if we stick with the clicker box for now, and we stick with this software, we're good. But at some point in time, we may want to go shop around for new software. And by having a tablet and utilizing this tablet as our voting device, we then open up the field for not just software that's compliant with this hardware, but software that's compliant with a very common piece of software that is acceptable out there. Software that's compliant with hardware that's out there and is compliant with a lot of different softwares around the area. Now, the reason I brought a pen is because I think we are not doing our diligence if we can't speak to every one of these concerns that were brought up to this point. So I just want to go through these items and talk through it a little bit. So in regards to taking away people's rights to vote, the intention of the statement on here that said to allow voice votes was basically saying that if there's an individual that does not want to use technology for whatever reason, maybe it's a handicap or maybe it's just a preference, we wanted to, with the intent of that, was to give them the ability to vote, not using it, just like today for folks that don't want to use the clickers, which most of us do use. Now, the other thing is discrimination. As far as I know, right now, from a feature standpoint, this tablet gives us just as many features as the clicker box does. The difference is I have an additional feature where I don't have to look up there to see what we're voting on. I also have an additional feature for my vision. I don't even need my glasses. So talking about a disability, I can read very easily on my tablet what's going on better than I can read from far side away. So I do not believe that this discriminates. In fact, if anything, I believe this tablet opens us up to more features than are limited by a clicker box. And it allows us to see things better, and I believe it does the opposite of discriminating. In fact, it opens things up for folks who do have vision problems. Rule changes, I do want to make sure that with council that we're not breaking any kind of rules and that we're following the procedures appropriately. In regards to voting on a procedure for the next body, well, the next body can come in and vote this down if they don't like it. They still have that ability. We're not handicapping them from doing that. I also want to know from council if the executive signature is required for a vote of this type, to make sure we're doing that right. And Wingram, I'm not exactly sure where you're coming from removing your right to vote. This is about voting. This is about just standardizing our procedure and addressing the times. And then in regards to the dead batteries, we did have that discussion, and it's a valid point, and that's why we kind of want to leave this little space cushion of time in there to make sure that we're accounting for all these little gotchas that we didn't think about and making sure that folks are able to vote. And at this point, I would like to propose an amendment, because I do agree with Eisen that we do not want to paint ourselves into a corner and exclusively leave us only a voice vote for an option. I do want to add the ability to do the rise vote and the written ballot. And I, again, am proposing, and whatever, yeah, thanks, whatever is needed to non-electronically vote.
So there was an amendment. Was there a second? Second. Okay, so there was a motion to amend and a second. Can you please restate your amendment? Because I think you need to put the language in several different areas of the resolution. Wherever it says voice vote, you would need to add the amended language. So, for example, there's a voice vote on line 14. There's voice vote on line 17. So you need to amend to both 14 and 17 with the verbiage that you're looking for.
I gotta think of how the verbiage would be. Yeah, the intent of this was for folks that choose not to use the devices to be able to make a non-electronic vote. So I'm not exactly sure how to go about wording that.
I mean, you could clarify and achieve most of it by saying a voice vote or written ballot. You'd be covering most of what you were looking for then.
Then that's how I want to do it.
Okay? Is that what you're looking for? Or written ballot would be after voice vote on 14 and after voice vote on 17. Is that okay with the second? Yes. Okay. So that is our amendment, to add the wording or written ballot after voice vote on line 14 and after voice vote on line 17. So all debate now going forward will be on that amendment specifically. So I'll call on Supervisor Fari specifically on the amendment to add those wordings.
No, I'll reserve mine for the
For the main motion.
resolution in particular.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingren, specifically on the amendment.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm intentionally trying to just give my opinion. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm sorry if that happened. But, Mr. Eisen, you cannot have in a legislative body a paper ballot. We do that once every 2 years when we elect a chairman or a vice chairman of this body. That is permitted as a secret ballot. You can't sit here and vote by a paper ballot. How would the public know which way you voted? That's the point. This is an open body. Open meeting law applies. You can't try to hide your vote. Now, the other part of it, I have to say, to me it goes along with it, that is, the objection I have is the two-way split in the same vote. We're voting if the sky is blue. Half of us are going to vote by the machine, the other half are going to have the roll call vote. Well, this is very controversial, especially this time of year. So I'm not going to use the machine just for this example. I'm going to wait to have my name called. I'm going to count how the vote is going. That's what I referred to. This is the games they play in legislative bodies. They wait. And that could be done here. Why would we do this? We don't need to do this. If you want to do it all the same, why not just do voice votes all the time? At the city council level here in Oshkosh, everybody has one of those machines, no problem. But when it comes to voting, there's 7 people. They vote by roll call vote. There's not half 3 don't vote one way and 3 there. That's my point. And I'm sorry, but I just, with all due respect, think that to call me, or I'll use me, handicapped, because I want to do my vote, using this resolution. It says both ways, voice vote, and then, of course, it comes down to the very resolution itself, which we're voting on, which it says here, you've got 3 major errors right in the resolution. That's unheard of. It says voice vote. Now I want to change that. It says majority of those present. No, it's a rule change. It's 2/3 of those present. It says county executive signs it. No, he doesn't. He doesn't sign rules for the county board. So how can you put this out to the public with 3 major errors? 3 major errors. The public has no chance to speak on this tonight because they don't know that there were 3 major errors. So with that, I urge us just to defeat it. And again, I absolutely agree with Mr. Lenz that if at the orientation meeting, those that are here can change it if they wish. But then do it the right way. Let's do it the right way. Follow the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Supervisor Finch, specifically on the amendment to add the language or written ballot.
Through all the talking, I got a little lost in the process. But it could be on the amendment, because
But we want to keep it specifically to the amendment.
Let me finish. I would rather see, instead of going through all this stuff, because some people like myself, I know there's other people, because of what I've been hearing, are not, I'm not going to say not that educated on it, or I'd rather see a special meeting or something where we can actually learn, because I'm just totally confused on how to use that, and how can you make us use it if we don't know how to use the darn thing? And there is an age difference here. You got to understand that also. You get the people that never saw a computer until they were like 60 years old, but a lot of these other young kids saw them when they were 3 years old, all right? So there is a knowledge of learning how to use it. Then you got people that are up in age that the computer wasn't even thought of. Excuse me, there was a typewriter on at that time. But anyway, I'd rather see a special meeting on this. The county board to use the iPad, right now, it's age difference. There's some of us that we've tried. No. There's other ones that they just touch it and bingo, it's perfect. So I'd rather see a special meeting to do all this stuff, to do us electronics and whole 9 yards. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Supervisor Wojciechowski on the amendment to add the language "or written ballot."
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just real quick, if I'm correct, this is on
But
the amendment.
This is specifically on the amendment, so you're correct. He's had 2 on the main motion. He would only get 1 more on the main motion. Please go ahead and proceed.
Just real quick to Finch's point, if I'm correct, I think there was a special orders meeting on the specific voting technology that took place. I don't know, I might be incorrect, but I thought that already happened. But to the amendment, or actually before, real quick, I just have a question for Sue that might pertain to this. When we vote on these devices, if one isn't working, like that has happened in the past, and you can't get it to work just for whatever reasons, how would someone vote then, in that case?
With this system, it comes up and it tells us not everybody has voted. And we've never had to do anything with that. So I'm assuming we'd have to make that person not present so that the machine, because it's thinking if it only shows that 30 votes are recorded, we've got 32 people here, we'd have to make those people not present to bring it down to the 30 votes that were cast and let that vote result print, and then we'd have to just manually adjust the roll call sheet to make those 2 people present and then record their vote. There wouldn't be a way to do it electronically that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's good to know. But I think with the resolution, or with the attempt that's, the amendment, is to just clarify the language of, giving you that option, if you don't want to use the electronic device, to have those other options. Like I said, this would be considered an electronic device under that definition because it is a county electronic device. So it's not even saying necessarily that you have to go to the iPad right away. It's just, pushing you in that direction. But what the amendment does is, if you don't want to use the county electronic device, it will allow you to do, a non-electronic vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Weiss, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if I can do this or not, but I'm reading the discussions on, about the motions on page 35, and it's my feeling that this needs a little bit of work at the committee level. I'd like to make to commit this back to committee.
Okay, so there is a motion to refer the resolution back to committee. You can do that. So it does take precedence, so now all further debate is on the motion to refer back to the Information Systems Committee. Okay, so all debate is on it. It is debatable. So next speaker would be Supervisor Fari, specifically on the referral back to the committee only.
Well, once again.
Your timing is...
That's not what I want to address. I have a question about the written ballot
Well,
verbiage.
yep. So we'll do this motion first. If it's referred back, then it's a moot point for this evening. If not, then we'll address your question certainly.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers, specifically on the referral to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really more of a point of order. I'd like for us to call each other either Mr. Eisen and Mr. Finch, or Supervisor Eisen and Supervisor Finch, and not simply Eisen and Finch. Let's use some kind of proper proper etiquette with when we're just referring to, we're talking either about or to each other. They're not Finch and Eisen, they're Supervisor Finch and Supervisor Eisen. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Lenz, specifically on the referral to the committee.
You know, you bring up a great point that maybe we can do some more work on this, but what do you want us to do on this? You know, anytime we've had this happen before where we brought forward a resolution and we've had people say, well, send it back to committee, make some changes, but we've never had any other supervisors besides, I think, Supervisor Norton has been the only person who's ever shown up to an IS committee meeting. And it wasn't on it was on something else unrelated to the voting procedures or paperless. What it be? You know, we've never gotten emails from any other people about what they'd like to see in this procedure. You know, this has, I forgot when when this was put online, but there's been time for people to, ask us questions. We had it at, I think, was it November? Yeah, November was when we voted on this. And we actually originally had it at the October meeting, but we thought that some changes needed to be happened. So then November was when it was actually voted on. So there was, I think, a good amount of time, and I believe I have mentioned this at meetings that this is something we have been looking at, and that would be brought forward. But we have gotten no feedback from anyone, at committee meetings or emails saying, we know that you're working on this, and this is what we'd like you to address or keep in mind when writing this. So, we welcome feedback, and we want you to come to our committee meetings or at least send us an email saying, this is what we want to see in this resolution. If we don't get any feedback or anything, how are we supposed to address these issues that you're bringing up? So, I am fine with sending it back to the committee, but if you're going to send it back to the committee and have the request of us making changes, I would ask that you actually show up to the meeting or send us an email with the feedback that you want, because that's how we're going to make this a good resolution, one that we can all agree on. So that would be my only request if we're going to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Norton.
And I agree with Supervisor Wojciechowski. If there is a reason to send this back to committee, let's understand what that reason is. I've been witnessing for the last couple of years the use of sending something back to committee as a way to either try to defer the decision making or to just simply make it a no vote. If there is something to be improved upon, then please give us some direction to improve upon it. Otherwise, let's take a vote on this tonight and make a decision to move forward with.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
I second this amendment to our motion to send it back to meeting, because I think there are a number of questions. I think, and Aaron said it right, Supervisor Wojciechowski and Supervisor Lenz said it best. I think that Supervisor Fari and Supervisor Wingren and maybe me and others should go to that meeting, the second Wednesday or whatever, and have concerns and hash it out. I have questions still. I earlier stated them. So that's why I think it's best to send it back to the committee and bring it back in December and vote on it.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking in an effort to perfect the procedure which apparently the chair of the IS committee is reaching out to find. And what I would suggest is that it would be, inasmuch as this voting resolution is a change of rules, it's the proper jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee. Now, if the Information Services Committee wants to change the rules and they want to get the experience of a chairman who has dealt with rules for over a decade, maybe 18 years dealing with rules, I think that it may be an enhancement to the effort to return this to the Information Services Committee, to return it to a joint Judiciary and Information Services Committee, so that at the committee level, the rules can be looked at, this can be fit in as 11.1A or 11, whatever the number of the rule would need to be, and so that you can get not only the proper format for the resolution, but you also get the experience of 5 additional supervisors at one table to discuss this, so we don't have to take 45 minutes of county board time. So I would move to amend the referral to the IS committee as a referral to the Joint Judiciary and Information Services Committee to be established and to review this.
Thank you, Supervisor
And if
Eisen.
anybody wants to second it, they can.
So it does require a second. Is there a second? That motion dies for a lack of second, Supervisor Eisen. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go directly to a vote. So so we're clear, we're voting on the motion to refer it back to the Information Systems Committee. That requires a simple majority for passage. So we're going to do a roll call vote for that. So vote aye if you want to approve referring it back to the Information Systems. Vote nay if you don't. No, we're going to vote on machine. No. So that motion carries 23 to 12. So that is referred back to the Information Systems Committee. Okay, so moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 244-11-2019. Authorized payment of excess committee days. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen. There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 244-11-2019. Any discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do this every year, and I yet have fully understood this. Can you explain to me, how do you have, the first column says whole day committee session assigned. I don't believe there are any committees that we're assigned to that meet a whole day, are they? Are there? Yeah, but that's not a committee, that's the board. Could you explain to me how this all works? The numbers are way all over the place. I'm not going to embarrass anyone and ask why the numbers are so high, but I just wondered how this works.
Okay, I'll call on the Clerk Ertmer to just review the data with you.
Actually, this is a report, I'm not going to force it on Julie, but this is a report that she works with. So Julie, if I say something incorrect, but basically, if you have anything in excess of the 30 days, it's going to show up in that total excess days column. Statutorily, you're allowed 30 assigned committee days, and if you exceed that, then you have to have that approved by the board. So the half days, obviously a half day, to have a full day, you'd have to have 2 half days. So that's why the half day column, you have 60 you'd have to double that to make that a full day, if that makes sense. So 10 half days be 5 full days. So that's how you're coming up with the whole day columns, by adding those half days together. And then the ones that are in excess of those total 30 days shows up in that excess column.
Isn't that misleading then? It would give you the wrong impression as how many meetings a person attended, wouldn't it?
Well, not necessarily the number of meetings, but just the number of meeting days.
And then I think I asked this last year, and that is, what if we voted no? Do they get paid? The answer is yes, so why are we voting on this? Exactly.
It's already been paid,
What's the
yes.
point?
Yeah.
What's the point?
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Smith, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, because I had on Wednesday, I had the Railroad Consortium Committee meeting Wednesday morning, and then where I went in Juneau, and then I was back 5:30 at night to have our IS committee meeting. So those are two separate committee meetings. And that, so they would be each as a separate meeting, committee meeting. And then the day before, I was from 7 o'clock, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the DOT freight rail forum. And that counts as the whole day, right?
But was that a seminar? These are assigned committee days. That would be different if you were like at a seminar or a conference. This would be like a specific meeting of your railroad consortium or the Personnel and Finance Committee. So I'm just not sure if that full day was at a conference or a seminar, or was that?
That was the conference, well, actually, it was a seminar for freight rail.
Okay.
Okay, so I was there for the entire day.
So it wouldn't be considered an assigned committee day, correct? Do you put their conferences? Okay.
So that would be at $50 rather than $75.
Right, that would be considered a whole day meeting, but it doesn't fall under this because
Okay.
it's not an assigned committee day.
Okay.
Very good. Please go right ahead.
I will do my
Ms.
best
Marshall.
here. When you turn in your per diems, on the top of the form are your assigned committee days. On the bottom half are unassigned. Even though you put your conferences up on the top, like the WCA conferences and stuff, we separate that out. That's not, we don't consider that an assigned committee date. That's a conference. So Supervisor Wengren, when you asked, can you have a whole day for an assigned meeting? When you would have one of your JPS meetings, and I'm just going to use the coroner for an example. When you're discussing that and you go over 4 hours for that meeting, that constitutes a full day, and that's how you would get your full day. I still, and I'll say, I don't understand why this is all being approved after everybody's been paid, but I do believe it's a state statute that we have to provide this report to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Smith. Next speaker, Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I speak about this every year when we do this, and I wasn't planning on doing this at this time, but now it's become an issue. As was just stated, the state statute says 30 days. We pay the people. It's unauthorized. We don't let our employees do that, but yet we do that. And then we come in 6 months later and we authorize payment that's already been paid. And somebody said, what if we turn this down? They should give the money back. I'd like to see us do that, because this is a joke. We have the second biggest county board in the state, and yet we got people going over the 30 days. And you look at that list, and some people have what, less than 5 days? That's not good representation. These committees need to be assigned so that nobody goes over 30 days. I had planned on, in April, if I get on the board again, if I run again, to bring in a rule for, at that time, because that's the proper time to do it, for this board not to pay over 30 days no matter what. You can go to all the committees you want, but there's no reason why we should be paying anybody to go over 30 days when we have the second largest board in the state. And I know it doesn't amount to a lot of money It's just the principle of it. We don't allow our employees to do it. We should not be doing it. So I urge everybody to vote no on this so they give the money back. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Fari.
First of all, let me apologize for the half day I'm over. I regularly on certain Mondays have 3 meetings, and I only take one per diem. You know, I don't, it's ridiculous that we do go over the 30 days. I wasn't aware that I had, and it's not going to happen often. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on a comment, I believe I'm correct. You can only charge for 1 per diem per day, correct? So if a person is going to 2 meetings, is that counted on this chart even though they're not getting paid? I believe it was Mr. Smith, was it, that indicated he had gone to 2 meetings? I mean, is he saying he got paid for 2 meetings, or is he saying it counted as 2 meetings?
On your per diem slip, you would list both of them,
Yes.
but if it's 4 hours or less, for those 2 meetings, you would only get the $50. If it's over 4 hours, you would get $75. But you would not.
Oh, you get paid for a whole day if the 2 meetings together exceed 4 hours?
Correct.
Okay, that's never really been explained.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Albrecht.
Thank you. I think this is something that we definitely want to come back around to, or at least the folks that get reelected to the board, to discuss in April. It does seem kind of silly that that the cart's getting a little ahead of the bull on this one, where the payment goes out before we decide whether the payment should go out or not. And perhaps the deferment of those excess hours, or the payment of those, gets deferred till after the vote, which is not something we can do here today. But for folks that get reelected, I think that would be important. That's all I really got.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Through the years, we go through this every year, and a lot of counties pay a total price rather than a per diem. So that's one way they get around it, but most of the counties don't do this. A lot of counties don't do it all, keep track of it.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I see I went over a half a day also. And I know sometimes I fill in for the chairman at some things and some meetings and that, and I am on committees, but when the committee when they appointed this year, a lot of you are only on certain committees. You don't want to go on to different committees. And some of you sat around at that and thought it was a good job. And there's one of the supervisors in here, some of you that are saying, feel so bad for, that person only wanted to go on one committee, and if that person didn't get on the committee, she didn't want to go on to any other committee. So, I mean, you can come to the meetings too. So, yes, I'm on committees. I'm on 3 different committees. So, and I know there's other ones too. But there's other places that I fill in, and I don't. If I got 2 meetings a day, I only charge for 1, and I charge the half a day too. And I don't put in for a lot of mileage either. So sometimes some of you think that you're getting awful bad deals. Maybe you should study the whole thing of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Supervisor Rasmussen brings up a great point. I think maybe we just need to look at this a little more. And, you know, I know some people who have requested to be on more than one committee, but we're only given that one. Meanwhile, there are some people who have 3, 4, 5 committees. You know, I think that's something we need to look at, spreading out, you know, the representation on these committees maybe is a solution to those problems. You know, and I think, you know, it's kind of the system we have now, but I think it's, you know, this gives us a reason to kind of look at it more and kind of just see what's going on. You know, I think we should look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I call for the question.
Okay, there's a motion to call the question. Is there a second? Second. Okay, there's a motion and a second to call the question. That is not debatable. So we will go to let's try a voice vote first. This is just to call the question. Okay, 2/3 to call the question. All those in favor to call the question, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That was easy. So that question is called. We will go directly to a vote. We're going to go ahead and do a roll call vote for it. So vote aye if you approve the excess committee days. Vote no if you don't. Does require 2/3 majority to pass. That motion carries 28-6. It required 24 to pass. And there was one abstention. Okay, so moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 245-11-2019. Amend the table of organization for the Winnebago County Public Health Department by adding one full-time suicide prevention project coordinator position. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 245-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution 245-11-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 246-11-2019. Amend the table of organization for the Winnebago County Facilities and Property Management Department to eliminate one full-time administrative associate facilities position and add one full-time accounting associate position. I'll once again call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you. I move for resolution number 246-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 246-11-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll once again do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 247-11-2019. Amend Human Resources Policy 17 related to vacation. I'll once again call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 247-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 247-11-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the final resolution. That's resolution number 248-11-2019. Adopt revisions to Winnebago County compensation schedule for 2020. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
248-11-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 248-11-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that concludes our business for this evening, so I will call on Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn.
December 16th for the Christmas party, and the county board meeting will be on December 17th, Tuesday.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.